Hey guys, tonight we are gently closing the heavy oaken doors on the present day and stepping softly back into the often turbulent, yet surprisingly routine-bound world of Tudor England. Our focus this evening will not be on the grand battles or the high-stakes political maneuvering from an eagle's eye view, but rather we'll be easing into the surprisingly quiet and rather plush tapestried nursery of a young prince who, for a good portion of his early life, wasn't even initially destined for the throne. Prince Henry, the future and famously formidable Henry VIII. Imagine, if you can, the cool, gray light of an early English morning filtering through a lidded glass window, the distant, muffled sounds of a vast royal palace slowly stirring to life, the faint, clean scent of beeswax polish on dark wood and fresh herbs strewn amongst the rushes on the floor. You are a young boy, secure in your royal status, but with a prescribed, and for now, distinctly secondary role in the grand scheme of the Tudor dynasty. Now Henry VIII, as I'm sure you're aware, is rather famous for a lot of rather dramatic, often quite controversial, and frequently very final decisions regarding matters of state, religion, and of course matrimony. If you're settling in tonight expecting a high-octane, emotionally charged royal soap opera filled with scandalous affairs and dramatic pronouncements every 5 minutes, you probably won't survive the sheer, plodding, almost glacial pace of 16th century bureaucracy, theological debate, and the minutiae of daily royal administration that we'll be gently focusing on. We are, after all, aiming for boring Tudor history, the decidedly sleepy ASMR version, designed to lull you into a state of peaceful historical oblivion. So, before you get entirely comfortable and begin your slow drift into the annals of the past, take a moment, if you will, to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only, of course, if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, these calm, quiet explorations of history's more soporific side. Your gentle support truly does help this little historical haven to grow and allows me to continue crafting these sleepy narratives for you. And as you nestle down, do let us know in the comments where you're drifting off from tonight and what time it is in your own tranquil corner of the globe. It's always a quiet pleasure to know where our sleepy stories are landing and who they're helping to unwind. Now, dim the lights just a little further. Maybe turn on a fan if you enjoy that soft, consistent background hum, and let's ease ever so gently into tonight's Tudor journey together. You awaken not to the blare of a modern alarm, nor the insistent vibration of a forgotten device, but to the subtle, gradual increase of natural light in your chamber, perhaps accompanied by the distant, muted sounds of the royal household beginning its day, the faint clatter of pewter from the distant kitchens, the low murmur of servants' voices in the corridors, the crowing of a rooster from a far-off courtyard. You are Prince Henry, born in the year of our Lord 1491, at the magnificent, if somewhat new, Palace of Placentia in Greenwich, a favored residence of your father, King Henry VII. The air in your nursery is cool, probably smelling faintly of wood smoke from the perpetually burning fireplaces, dried lavender and chamomile. Strewn amongst the floor rushes to keep things sweet, and perhaps the slightly medicinal scent of some herbal infusion your careful nurse insists you drink for good health. You are, it is important to remember, the second son. This fact shapes your entire early existence. Your elder brother, Arthur, Prince of Wales, is the golden heir, the focus of the kingdom's hopes, the one meticulously groomed from birth to inherit the Tudor crown that your father fought so hard to win and secure upon his own head after the bloody, dynastic turmoil of the Wars of the Roses. Your destiny, young Hal, as you are sometimes affectionately known within the family, is less clearly defined but widely assumed to involve a distinguished career in the church. Perhaps you will become an Archbishop of Canterbury, a powerful prince of the church, wielding spiritual authority and offering wise counsel to your brother, the king. Or maybe a significant ducal title will be yours, along with vast estates, allowing you to serve the crown in a more secular, though still supporting, capacity. There is less immediate pressure on your young shoulders, perhaps, than on Arthur's, but also a less certain path to ultimate power and renown. Your career counseling at this early stage, if it could be so formally described, is basically option A: become a very learned and extremely powerful archbishop, which comes with some truly excellent hats and a great deal of solemn responsibility. Option B: try very hard not to annoy your elder brother Arthur, who, as you recall, the actual future king. Option C: option B, but with more Latin studies. Simple really in its own 16th century way. The Tudor dynasty itself is still relatively new, established by your astute, careful, and some might say, rather parsimonious father after his victory at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. His reign has been characterized by a relentless focus on consolidating power, restoring royal finances after years of civil war, establishing law and order, and above all, securing the Tudor succession beyond any shadow of a doubt. The ghosts of the Plantagenet claimants and the bitter memories of decades of dynastic strife still linger, and this underlying anxiety for stability, for legitimacy, for an undisputed line of heirs, pervades the very atmosphere of your father's court. The importance of healthy male heirs is a constant unspoken pressure. Your own earliest childhood impressions are likely a blend of opulent luxury and a somewhat formal, almost regimented, daily routine. You live within a world of grand tapestried chambers, of elaborate court ceremonies, of constant deference from everyone you encounter. Nurses, physicians, and a growing retinue of tutors and attendants cater to your every need, but always within a framework of strict etiquette and dynastic expectation. You catch glimpses of your powerful, often rather stern and preoccupied father, King Henry VII, a man known more for his shrewd mind and his meticulous attention to the kingdom's accounts than for any outward displays of casual affection. Your mother, Elizabeth of York, daughter of King Edward IV, represents the bringing together of the warring houses of Lancaster and York, and her gentle presence is perhaps a softer, more reassuring influence in your young life. You have your older brother, Arthur, the focus of so much attention, and your sisters, Margaret and Mary, your companions in the rarefied, somewhat enclosed world of the royal nursery. The Wi-Fi password for the royal palace, had such a wondrous, almost magical thing existed back then, would probably have been something like, "Long live the Tudors and kindly don't mention Richard III, 1485. And your father, being the cautious man he was, would undoubtedly have insisted on changing it, at least weekly, just to be on the absolutely safe side. Historians still argue whether your father, Henry VII's famously shrewd, undeniably successful, but often rather austere and fiscally conservative approach to kingship actually created a somewhat joyless, overly formal, or even repressive court environment for his children, or if the surviving historical evidence, when carefully examined, points towards a more conventional, if undoubtedly highly structured and exceptionally security-conscious, royal upbringing for you, young Prince Henry, and for your royal siblings, Arthur, Margaret, and Mary. Perhaps you, young Hal, as a bright and energetic second son, have a finely carved wooden knight on a prancing horseback, or a cherished set of miniature silver soldiers, and you dream not yet of actually wearing a crown yourself, but of chivalric deeds, of valor in tournaments, of perhaps one day leading armies for your brother, the king, or maybe your greatest, if slightly more reluctant, joy is a brand new, beautifully illuminated Latin primer from which your learned tutor, perhaps the poet John Skelton, will soon expect you to recite perfectly formed, grammatically flawless, classical phrases and devotional passages. A truly thrilling and entirely appropriate prospect, of course, for any royal second son with potential future ecclesiastical ambitions. Your play dates, one imagines, are probably very carefully orchestrated, highly supervised meetings with the equally well-dressed and impeccably mannered children of other extremely important noble families, where everyone is on their absolute best behavior and probably already subtly sizing each other up for future political alliances, advantageous betrothals, or perhaps just very awkward, protocol-laden courtly dances. Less spontaneous mud pie making in the palace gardens, one suspects, and rather more strategic, if somewhat stilted, small talk about the weather and the latest treatise on theological matters. But for now, in these very early years, these grand dynastic concerns, these weighty matters of state and succession, are but distant, incomprehensible thunder on a far horizon. You are simply a young prince, second in line, awakening to another carefully managed and entirely predictable day in the relatively quiet, protected, and deeply ordered world of the royal nursery. A day that will soon be filled, you know, with the structured lessons, the pious instruction, and the courtly refinements deemed entirely appropriate for a young boy of royal blood who might one day wear the deep crimson robes of a cardinal of the church rather than the heavy golden and currently entirely unexpected crown of a king of England. But for now, in these very early formative years of your young life, grand dynastic concerns and the weighty matters of state and royal succession are but distant, incomprehensible thunder on a far horizon, rumbles from an adult world that has yet to fully claim you. You are, for the present, simply Prince Henry, the king's second son, awakening to another carefully managed and entirely predictable day within the relatively quiet, protected, and deeply ordered world of the royal nursery and schoolroom, a day that will soon be filled, as so many of your days are, with the structured lessons, the pious instruction, and the courtly refinements deemed entirely appropriate and indeed essential for a young boy of royal blood who might, with a fair degree of probability, one day wear the deep, rich crimson robes of a cardinal of the church, or perhaps the ermine-trimmed mantle of an archbishop of Canterbury, rather than the heavy golden and currently entirely unexpected crown of a king of England. Your schoolroom is likely a quiet, well-lit chamber within one of the royal palaces, perhaps Eltham or Greenwich or Sheen. It is comfortably furnished, no doubt, with sturdy oak tables and chairs, shelves holding a precious collection of handwritten manuscripts, and the new, marvelously uniform printed books, and perhaps a tapestry on the wall depicting a suitably edifying biblical scene or a moment of classical virtue. The atmosphere here is one of serious, disciplined application. While your elder brother, Arthur, Prince of Wales, the heir apparent, might spend a greater portion of his day engaged in the more martial pursuits deemed necessary for a future king, riding, jousting practice, swordsmanship, your own education, as the spare is more heavily weighted towards intellectual, spiritual, and scholarly development. This is not to say you are entirely denied physical exercise, but the emphasis is different, tailored for a life of ecclesiastical leadership or high-level learned counsel. The absolute cornerstone of your rigorous curriculum, the bedrock upon which all other learning is built, is Latin. Hours upon countless hours are spent under the watchful eye of your tutors, meticulously declining nouns, conjugating verbs, memorizing complex grammatical rules, and painstakingly translating carefully selected passages from classical authors. You might wrestle with the noble cadences of Virgil's Aeneid, the intricate prose of Cicero's orations, or perhaps even some of the more morally acceptable and heavily edited sections of Ovid's Metamorphoses. alongside these pagan classics, and arguably of even greater importance given your presumed future, are the voluminous writings of the Church Fathers, Saint Augustine, Saint Jerome, Gregory the Great. Their dense theological arguments and eloquent defenses of the faith requiring intense concentration and a profound understanding of ecclesiastical Latin. One of your less thrilling, though nonetheless diligently performed, daily tasks might involve meticulously copying out long, edifying passages from Isidore of Seville's Etymologies, an ancient and incredibly comprehensive, if occasionally rather wildly inaccurate, 7th century encyclopedia covering everything from theology to agriculture. You sometimes suspect your long-suffering tutor assigns these lengthy transcription exercises purely to test your reserves of patience, your ability to form perfect, unblotted script, and your capacity to remain fully awake while wielding a sharpened goose quill for 3 consecutive, mind-numbing hours. It is, you decide with a silent internal sigh, a truly heroic form of mental endurance training, perfectly suited for a future prince of the church. Theology and religious studies naturally form a major component of your education. You diligently study the Holy Scriptures, commit the Catechism to memory, learn the inspiring, if sometimes rather alarming, lives of the saints, and absorb the complex history of the Christian Church. You might even be encouraged to engage in formal disputations, structured debates on subtle points of theological doctrine, honing your skills in logical argument and eloquent defense of the Orthodox faith, skills that will, in a rather ironic and unforeseen twist of fate, be famously employed by you in later life, though perhaps not always in ways your early tutors might have entirely approved. It's a mainstream historical fact that you, Prince Henry, later King Henry VIII, received an exceptionally thorough education, particularly strong in theology and languages, which was considered entirely appropriate for a younger son of the king, who was widely expected to pursue a high-ranking career within the church. You were known even in your youth to be intelligent, quick-witted, and a surprisingly good student, and later in your reign, you even authored a significant theological treatise, the Assertio Septem Sacramentorum, Defense of the Seven Sacraments, directly attacking the reformist ideas of Martin Luther, an act which earned you the title Defender of the Faith from a grateful Pope Leo X, a title you might reflect with a touch of future historical irony that British monarchs continue to use to this very day, albeit under rather different ecclesiastical circumstances. Music is another area where you excel, and perhaps one that brings you more genuine, unadulterated pleasure than the endless intricacies of Latin grammar or the finer points of scholastic philosophy. You learn to play various instruments with considerable skill, the gentle plucked notes of the lute, the delicate chime of the virginals, a type of harpsichord, perhaps even the imposing sonorous tones of the chapel organ. You are taught to sing, your voice clear and strong, and you may even dabble in music theory and the art of composition, creating your own simple melodies. This love of music will remain with you throughout your life. Beyond Latin, your linguistic studies likely include some Greek, essential for a deeper understanding of the New Testament and classical philosophy. French, the international language of diplomacy and courtly culture, would also be a necessity. And given the complex web of European alliances and dynastic marriages, a smattering of Spanish or even Italian might be added to your curriculum. Mathematics, or sums, as it might be more prosaically termed, is also taught, focusing on practical arithmetic for keeping accounts, though perhaps less emphasized for you than for your brother Arthur, who would one day need to manage the finances of an entire kingdom. Still, even an archbishop needs to be able to balance the books of his diocese. Rhetoric and logic, the arts of persuasive speaking and clear reasoning, are also honed, vital skills for debate, for preaching from the pulpit, and for navigating the complex world of courtly or ecclesiastical diplomacy. And of course, there is history, the chronicles of England, the histories of ancient Rome and Greece, the annals of the Church, all studied to provide examples of virtue to emulate and of folly to avoid. Your idea of a truly wild, rebellious night out at this stage of your young life is probably secretly reading a slightly risque, unassigned passage from Ovid by flickering illicit candlelight, fervently hoping you don't get caught by your vigilant tutor and assigned an extra 100 lines of penitential psalms to copy out before breakfast. Thrills and spills, Tudor prince style. Your tutors, men of considerable learning and often stern demeanor. The poet John Skelton, for instance, served as one of your early preceptors. Employ the pedagogical methods of the age, rote memorization, frequent recitation, formal disputation, and the laborious but essential practice of copying texts by hand to instill both knowledge and good penmanship. The hours of study are long, the discipline strict. Educational historians and Tudor scholars continue to debate the precise curriculum and the specific pedagogical methods that were employed in your upbringing. Prince Henry, particularly, how much your early education was genuinely and exclusively geared towards a future church career versus how much of it was designed to provide a broad, humanist grounding in letters and arts that would be suitable for any high-ranking prince of the Renaissance, regardless of his ultimate destiny, and how this early intensive learning might have profoundly influenced your later more famous and often rather dramatic actions as king. Alongside these rigorous academic pursuits, there is, naturally, your ongoing courtly training. Even a spare destined for the church must possess the requisite graces and accomplishments of a Tudor nobleman. You learn the intricate rules of court etiquette, the proper forms of address, the art of polite, engaging conversation, the complex figures of courtly dances. You are instructed in heraldry, in the lineages of noble families, and perhaps you receive some discreet introductory lessons in statecraft, though these would be far less intensive than those provided for your elder brother, the Prince of Wales. This social polish will prepare you for a prominent role at court, or as a high-ranking ambassador of the church, able to move with ease and confidence in the most exalted circles. And so your days unfold, a carefully, almost relentlessly orchestrated symphony of Latin declensions and theological arguments, of musical scales, and precisely executed dance steps, of pious instruction and the subtle, unspoken art of courtly comportment. You are being meticulously molded, piece by painstaking piece, into the ideal image of a learned, devout, accomplished, and influential churchman, or perhaps a distinguished and loyal ducal figure supporting your brother's future reign. But the fates, those ever unpredictable, often rather mischievous, weavers of human destiny, are even now, as you diligently practice your lute or wrestle with a particularly thorny passage from St. Augustine, preparing to snip a crucial, irreplaceable thread in the grand Tudor family tapestry, an unforeseen, tragic event that will irrevocably alter your carefully planned future and set your young feet upon a path you were never initially intended, or indeed educated, to tread. And so your young days, as Prince Henry, the King of England's second son, unfold within the royal palaces in a carefully, almost relentlessly orchestrated symphony of Latin declensions and complex theological arguments, of musical scales practiced on the lute or virginals, and precisely executed formal courtly dance steps. You are being meticulously, piece by painstaking piece, molded by your learned tutors and stern governors into the ideal image of a learned, devout, accomplished, and suitably influential churchman, perhaps a future Archbishop of Canterbury, a wise cardinal, or at the very least, a distinguished and loyal ducal figure offering learned counsel and unwavering support to your elder brother's future reign. Your path seems clearly, if perhaps somewhat unexcitingly, mapped out before you, but the fates, those ever unpredictable, often rather mischievous, and occasionally downright cruel weavers of human destiny, are even now, as you diligently practice your lute arpeggios or wrestle with a particularly thorny passage from St. Augustine's City of God, preparing to snip a crucial, irreplaceable thread in the grand Tudor family tapestry, an unforeseen, tragic event that will irrevocably alter your carefully planned future and set your young, unsuspecting feet upon a path you were never initially intended, or indeed specifically educated to tread. The focus of all dynastic hopes, the great shining beacon of the Tudor succession, is of course your elder brother, Arthur, Prince of Wales. He is the firstborn son of King Henry VII and Queen Elizabeth of York. His very existence, a symbol of the union of the warring houses of Lancaster and York, and the promise of future stability for a kingdom long ravaged by internal conflict. Arthur has been meticulously prepared for kingship from the moment of his birth. His education is geared towards statecraft, military leadership, and the weighty responsibilities of sovereignty. In November of 1501, a major diplomatic triumph for your father is achieved when Arthur, at the age of 15, is married to the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon, daughter of the powerful monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella. This alliance with Spain is of immense strategic importance, bolstering the Tudor dynasty's legitimacy on the European stage and promising future security. Shortly after the lavish wedding celebrations in London, Arthur and his new princess are dispatched to Ludlow Castle on the Welsh border, where Arthur is to preside over the Council of Wales and the Marches, gaining practical experience in governance. All seems set for a smooth and glorious Tudor future. Then, with shocking, devastating suddenness, tragedy strikes. In the early spring of 1502, just a few short months after his marriage, news, at first perhaps just uncertain whispers, and then confirmed, grim reports, begins to reach the royal court. Arthur, your elder brother, the Golden Prince of Wales, has fallen gravely ill at Ludlow. It's a mainstream historical fact that Arthur, Prince of Wales, died suddenly and unexpectedly in April 1502 at the tragically young age of just 15. The exact cause of his death remains a subject of some historical debate, with possibilities ranging from the dreaded sweating sickness, a mysterious and often fatal epidemic illness that plagued Tudor England, to consumption, tuberculosis, or perhaps another virulent infectious disease. Whatever the precise cause, his death is a profound dynastic crisis for your father, King Henry VII, and a source of immense personal grief for both your parents. The carefully laid plans for the future of the Tudor dynasty are thrown into sudden, terrifying disarray. And for you, young Prince Henry, then a boy of just 10 or 11 years old, this event is nothing short of cataclysmic. In an instant, your world is turned upside down. Despair is now the heir. The boy, destined for a life in the church, for a career of scholarship and spiritual leadership, is suddenly, almost unimaginably, the sole surviving male hope of the Tudor line, the next Prince of Wales, the future King of England. The weight of an entire kingdom's future now settles upon your young, unprepared shoulders. Imagine being told, as a 10-year-old, that your carefully planned, relatively quiet future career path, as say, a highly respected university librarian or a distinguished professor of ancient languages, is suddenly, irrevocably cancelled, and in its place, you are now, effective immediately, the CEO in waiting of the entire country, and absolutely everyone, from your grieving parents to the most powerful nobles in the land, is now watching your every move, your every word, your very state of health, with a new, intense, and almost desperate level of scrutiny. No pressure at all, young Hal. The atmosphere at court transforms overnight. Deep, genuine mourning for the lost Prince Arthur permeates every chamber, every gallery. The official period of mourning would have been a somber, lengthy, and highly ritualized affair, dictated by the strict, unyielding protocols of the Tudor court. You might recall endless, gloomy days where the entire court was draped in heavy black fabric, even the magnificent tapestries in the royal apartments perhaps temporarily covered or replaced with more suitably mournful hangings. The only truly acceptable topics of polite conversation would have been pious reflections on the fleeting nature of mortal life, or hushed, earnest discussions about the precise theological implications of your brother's untimely demise, or perhaps the subtle but critical differences in the appropriate shade of dark purple for second-degree versus third-degree mourning sleeves. Truly thrilling, stimulating times for an active, energetic young boy. But beneath the veneer of official grief, there is also a palpable thrum of anxiety, of uncertainty. The king and queen are devastated by their personal loss, but your father, Henry VII, ever the pragmatist, ever the guardian of his dynasty, must also immediately confront the new political and dynastic realities. His primary concern now becomes your health, your safety, your continued existence. You, who were once perhaps allowed a certain degree of boyish freedom, are now surrounded by an even more vigilant cordon of attendants, physicians, and guards. Every cough, every sniffle, every minor childhood ailment is likely met with a flurry of anxious consultations and an array of probably quite unpleasant preventative remedies. Your education, so carefully tailored for a future in the church, must now be reassessed and rapidly reoriented, while your existing aptitude for languages, theology, and music will certainly not be discarded. Indeed, a learned king is a respected king. A new emphasis will undoubtedly be placed on subjects more directly relevant to future kingship: the practicalities of statecraft, the arts of war and military strategy. Even if your father prefers diplomacy, the intricacies of English law, the history of your own royal predecessors, and the complex geography and political landscape of your kingdom and of Europe. Your tutors, you can well imagine, probably had a series of rather frantic, hushed meetings. Right then, gentlemen, scrap the advanced syllabus on obscure 4th century heresies for a bit. Does anyone know where we put that slightly dog-eared training manual on Kingship for Dummies, Tudor edition? And for heaven's sake, someone find him a sturdier practice sword. Slowly, formally, your new status is acknowledged. You are created Duke of Cornwall, a title traditionally held by the eldest son of the monarch. Then, in due course, usually after a suitable period, and when your father deems the time appropriate, you will be formally invested as Prince of Wales and Earl of Chester, the titles that explicitly designate you as the heir to the throne. These ceremonies, while no doubt filled with ancient pomp and solemn pronouncements, would also serve as a public declaration of the Tudor dynasty's continuity, a reassurance to the kingdom that despite the tragic loss of Arthur, a new heir stands ready. Suddenly, everyone at court who previously might have regarded you as that rather boisterous, charmingly athletic, but ultimately not critically important second son who plays the lute a bit too loudly for polite company is now looking at you with a newfound, intense, and frankly slightly unnerving level of profound respect, and you notice, with a dawning awareness, they are probably already beginning to mentally catalog future favors they might one day request from you. It's truly amazing what being unexpectedly bumped up to first in line to the actual throne can do for one's immediate social life and perceived importance. Historians and biographers continue to debate the precise and immediate psychological impact of Arthur's untimely death on your own sudden, almost shocking elevation to the status of heir apparent upon your young 10-year-old self. Some suggest this dramatic turn of events might have fostered an early, deeply ingrained sense of divine destiny a feeling of being specially chosen, perhaps even an almost messianic sense of exceptionalism that would later characterize much of your reign. Others point to the immense, almost unbearable pressure and the potential for deep-seated anxieties that such a sudden weight of expectation might have placed upon a young boy, not initially raised or temperamentally prepared for the direct line of succession. You were, after all, still just a child, grieving for your lost brother, while simultaneously trying to comprehend the monumental shift in your own future. And so, the carefree, relatively unburdened days of simply being the spare, with a future comfortably, if perhaps a little predictably, mapped out for you within the serene cloisters and scholarly pursuits of the church, are now irrevocably completely over. You are no longer just Prince Henry. You are Henry, Prince of Wales, the sole surviving male hope of the still relatively new and keenly insecure Tudor dynasty. The formidable, almost crushing, weight of future kingship now settles squarely upon your young, unseasoned shoulders, and the remaining years of your astute and famously cautious father's reign will become, for you, a new and far more intense kind of apprenticeship, a rigorous, all-encompassing preparation for the day, now looming inevitably in your future, when you will, indeed, be called upon to wear that heavy, golden, and often deeply perilous crown of England. And so, those long, studious years of your youth, meticulously overseen by your careful father and his chosen tutors, continue in their predictable and pious rhythm. You are Henry, Prince of Wales, the sole surviving male hope of the still relatively new and perpetually security-conscious Tudor dynasty. The formidable, almost crushing weight of future kingship has settled squarely upon your young, but increasingly broad and capable shoulders. The remaining years of your astute and famously cautious father's reign become, for you, a new and far more intense kind of apprenticeship, a rigorous, all-encompassing preparation for that day, once distant and now looming inevitably in your future, when you will indeed be called upon to wear that heavy, golden, and often deeply perilous crown of England. That day arrives in the spring of 1509. In April, your father, King Henry VII, after a long period of declining health, finally succumbs to his illness and passes from the world. The old king, the shrewd, austere, and deeply respected, if not something always universally loved founder of your dynasty, is dead. And you, just a few weeks shy of your 18th birthday, are now in that instant no longer the Prince of Wales, but His Majesty, King Henry VIII. The atmosphere at court is a strange and heady mix of solemn, obligatory mourning for the departed monarch and a palpable, almost electric buzz of excitement and profound hope for the new one. You are the embodiment of a new era, where your father was seen as cautious, frugal, and in his later years, somewhat dour and grasping. You are his opposite in almost every way: young, tall, handsome, athletic, highly educated, charismatic, and filled with a vibrant Renaissance energy. You are, in the eyes of your people and the courts of Europe, the very model of a modern, golden prince, and all of England seems to rejoice at your accession. One of your first acts as king is a popular one, designed to signal this new beginning. You order the arrest and, following a swift trial, the execution of your father's two most notoriously unpopular financial ministers, Edmund Dudley and Sir Richard Empson. These men, the chief architects of your father's often ruthless and extortionate tax policies, were widely despised, and their removal is a classic, crowd-pleasing move for a new monarch seeking to win the immediate goodwill of his people and nobility. It is a clear statement. The old austere ways are over. A new, more glorious age has dawned. Another early decision, of immense diplomatic and personal significance, is your marriage, just a few short weeks into your reign, to your brother Arthur's widow, the Spanish princess, Catherine of Aragon. After years of living in a state of diplomatic limbo following Arthur's death, this union finally solidifies the crucial alliance with Spain and fulfills what many, including Catherine herself, saw as your father's dying wish. It is a popular match, and your coronation alongside your new queen in June of 1509 is a magnificent spectacle of pomp, pageantry, and public rejoicing. Imagine the weight of the sacred oil on your brow, the almost crushing heaviness of St. Edward's crown being placed upon your head in Westminster Abbey, the thunderous shouts of Vivat Rex, long live the king, echoing through the ancient stone arches. You are truly, indisputably king. But once the coronation feasts have been consumed, the last of the celebratory wine has been drunk, and the cheering crowds have dispersed, the initial dazzling blaze of your accession and early popularity begins to settle into the steady, sometimes flickering, sometimes intensely hot, but always deeply demanding flame of daily governance. The exhilarating novelty of being king quickly gives way to the surprising and often quite tedious daily grind of actually being king. You are the ultimate chief executive officer, the supreme judge, and the commander-in-chief of the entire realm, and the administrative burden that comes with these roles is immense. Your days begin to fall into a structured, often relentless routine. You are woken early by your gentlemen of the Privy Chamber, a select group of trusted noble companions who attend to your every personal need, from helping you dress in your increasingly elaborate royal garments to serving your meals. Much of your working day is then spent in the company of your Privy Council, a body of your chief advisors composed of the great nobles and high-ranking churchmen of the realm. Many of them, like the cautious Archbishop Warham or the shrewd Bishop Fox, are experienced old hands inherited from your father's administration, their faces etched with the wisdom and weariness of long years of service. You sit at the head of the council table for hours on end, listening to lengthy debates on matters of state policy, the intricacies of royal finance, the ever-shifting landscape of foreign affairs, or petitions for justice from your subjects. You quickly learn that being king involves less spontaneous noble feasting and chivalric jousting, and far more sitting in a surprisingly uncomfortable, heavily carved chair for 6 hours, while a very old man named Thomas reads you a 300-page report on wool tariffs and shipping disputes. It's not quite what the glamorous recruitment posters for Renaissance monarch might have promised. And then there is the paperwork. An endless river of state papers flows across your desk, each one requiring your royal consideration, your decision, and ultimately your signature. Imagine your modern-day email inbox after you've just taken over a major international corporation. Now multiply that by 1,000. Make all the emails written in dense, formal, 16th century legal English or Latin on actual crackling parchment, and add the rather stressful fact that a slow or ill-considered reply might accidentally start a war with France or bankrupt the royal treasury. That is a glimpse into your daily reality. There are petitions from ordinary subjects seeking redress or favor, reports from your ambassadors in foreign courts detailing the latest political intrigues, financial accounts from the exchequer to be reviewed and approved, legal rulings to be confirmed, land grants to be awarded, and commissions to be signed. Your royal signature, your sign manual, Henry Rex, becomes the most powerful and sought-after autograph in the entire kingdom. You use it to approve treaties, to declare laws, and occasionally, you might imagine, to add a small handwritten note to the royal chefs requesting more roasted swans and considerably less pickled herring at the next upcoming state banquet. A king, after all, must maintain his priorities. Life is lived entirely in the public eye, within the nomadic community of your royal court, which moves frequently between your favored palaces at Greenwich, Westminster, Richmond, Windsor, and later Hampton Court. Every action you take, every word you speak, every flicker of royal favor or displeasure is keenly observed, noted, and endlessly analyzed by the hundreds of courtiers, officials, and attendants who surround you, all of them vying for position, power, and your personal patronage. There are also the constant, time-consuming public duties, receiving foreign ambassadors with all the solemn protocol and ceremony required, granting audiences to important nobles, attending lengthy chapel services, presiding over the great feasts of the liturgical calendar, and showing yourself to your people on feast days and during royal progresses. Historians often debate how much real, independent power you, the young Henry VIII, actually exercised in your first few years as king, versus the considerable extent to which you were guided, or perhaps even gently controlled, by your more experienced and deeply cautious counselors, those seasoned veterans inherited from your father's famously meticulous administration. Did you chafe at their cautious advice, eager to make your own glorious mark on the world, particularly through military adventure in France, something your father had so studiously avoided? Or did you, as an intelligent but inexperienced young monarch, initially defer to their wisdom while you learned the complex art of kingship? One of your less thrilling, but nonetheless rigidly required, daily duties might be presiding over something as seemingly trivial as the ceremony of the royal napkin, a deeply serious and profoundly tedious ritual involving multiple high-ranking nobles, a specific, unvarying series of bows and formal gestures, and the solemn presentation of a single piece of fine linen for you to wipe your royal hands upon before a meal. The sheer level of pomp, protocol, and solemnity involved in what is, essentially, an act of basic personal hygiene is, you find, both truly staggering and, on particularly long and boring days, a surprisingly potent cure for any impending insomnia you might be experiencing. And so the initial, dazzling, almost blinding blaze of your coronation and your early, widespread popularity begins to settle down into the steady, sometimes flickering, sometimes intensely hot, but always profoundly demanding flame of daily governance. The thrilling, abstract idea of being king is swiftly replaced by the concrete, often repetitive, reality of the job itself. The life of a king, you are swiftly and surely discovering, is a relentless, highly structured, and deeply predictable rhythm of duties and diversions, a profoundly important, yet often surprisingly mundane, daily cycle of decrees to be signed, formal dinners to be endured, and the ever-watchful, quill-wielding diarists and officials who are there to meticulously record your every single public move. And so, that initial, dazzling, almost blinding blaze of your coronation and your early, widespread popularity as the vibrant, handsome new king begins to settle, as all fires must, into the steady, sometimes flickering, sometimes intensely hot, but always profoundly demanding flame of daily governance. The thrilling, abstract, and perhaps somewhat romanticized idea of being the King of England is swiftly and surely replaced by the concrete, often repetitive, and surprisingly mundane reality of the job of being king. The life of a 16th century monarch, you are swiftly and surely discovering, is a relentless, highly structured, and deeply predictable rhythm of duties and diversions, a profoundly important, yet often quite surprisingly dull, daily cycle of solemn decrees to be considered, formal dinners to be endured, and the ever-watchful, quill-wielding diarists and court officials who are there to meticulously, and often rather verbosely, record your every single public move and utterance. Your day, for the most part, follows a stately and unvarying pattern. After you have awoken, been dressed by your gentlemen of the privy chamber in your elaborate layers of linen, silk, and velvet, and have attended morning mass in your private chapel, a duty of pious observance that begins every day, you might break your fast with a small meal. Then the real work, the true grinding business of kingship, begins. A significant portion of your morning is likely to be consumed by a meeting of your privy council. You sit at the head of a long, heavy oak table in a formal tapestried chamber, the air smelling faintly of beeswax polish and old parchment. Around you are seated your most trusted advisors, those grave, black-robed men, archbishops, bishops, and high-ranking nobles, whose counsel you depend upon to manage the complex machinery of your kingdom. The agenda for these meetings is rarely thrilling. You might spend a solid hour listening to a detailed report on a rather tedious trade dispute between a guild of English wool merchants and their counterparts in Flanders. Another hour might be devoted to hearing petitions from your subjects, read aloud in a monotonous drone by a clerk, each one pleading for royal favor, the settlement of a land dispute, or a pardon for some minor infraction. Your counselors will then debate, at great length, the merits of a proposed new statute concerning land enclosure, or the precise wording of a royal proclamation about the price of ale. All the while, the soft, incessant scratching of quills provides a constant, almost soporific soundtrack as clerks meticulously take minutes, their every pen stroke recording the ponderous turning of the wheels of state. Your role is to listen, to appear attentive and deeply engaged, to ask a few shrewd questions to show you are in command of the details, and ultimately to give your royal assent, your simple "so be it," which transforms a tedious proposal into the unshakable law of the land. The midday meal, your dinner, is rarely a quiet, private affair. More often than not, it is a grand, public performance of majesty, a ritual known as dining in state. You sit at a high table in the castle's great hall, raised on a dais, often under a cloth of estate bearing your royal coat of arms. Before you, a veritable army of servants moves with choreographed precision. There is a solemn procession of dishes, vast platters of roasted meats like venison, swan, or peacock, elaborate pies, jellies molded into fantastic shapes. Each dish is first presented to your official tasters, whose job it is to ensure it is not poisoned, a constant, if perhaps mostly theoretical, concern for any monarch. High-ranking nobles are granted the immense honor of acting as your cupbearer, your carver, or your server, each movement dictated by ancient, unyielding protocol. Below you, in the main body of the hall, hundreds of other courtiers dine at long trestle tables, their seating arranged in strict order of precedence and rank, and all the while you eat under the watchful gaze of this entire assembly, every royal bite, every sip of wine, a public spectacle designed to reinforce your majesty and the fixed hierarchical structure of the court you preside over. It is, you reflect, like having every single meal of your life be a live televised and very formal state banquet with a guest list of several hundred of your most important and most critical employees and colleagues. The afternoon might bring yet more public duties. You could spend hours granting formal audiences to foreign ambassadors, who deliver incredibly long, florid, and often rather obsequious speeches in Latin or French, which your secretaries have to painstakingly translate and summarize for you later. Your replies, in turn, are carefully drafted, often deliberately ambiguous, and designed to convey royal authority while committing to as little as possible. You must appear regal, wise, profoundly in control, and deeply interested, even when the ambassador from some minor German principality has been droning on for what feels like 3 full lifetimes about his duke's particular passion for a specific and to your mind entirely uninteresting breed of hunting dog. Sometimes, during a particularly long and mind-numbingly tedious ambassadorial speech about, for instance, North Sea herring fishing rights, you find yourself perfecting the subtle but essential art of the royal power, a state of profound mental repose achieved while keeping your eyes open and maintaining a facial expression of thoughtful, majestic, and deeply engaged contemplation. It is a key survival skill for any monarch of a major European power, and one you master with impressive speed. And always, always, you are being watched. This is the era of the diarist, the court chronicler, the ambassador sending detailed, coded reports back to his own sovereign. Every gesture you make, every casual word you utter, every fleeting frown or passing smile is noted, recorded, interpreted, and endlessly analyzed by the keen-eyed courtiers, diplomats, and officials who surround you. The lack of genuine privacy is absolute. You must constantly perform the role of the king, maintaining a carefully constructed royal face at all times, lest a moment of private wariness or personal irritation be misinterpreted as a sign of political weakness or royal displeasure. Historians continue to debate how this intensely public, almost theatrical, nature of Tudor monarchy might have affected the personal psychology of rulers like yourself, Henry VIII, questioning whether the constant, relentless performance of majesty eventually created a profound and perhaps unsustainable disconnect between the private man and the public persona, or if, over time, the two became so inextricably fused that there was no longer any discernible difference between them. A significant portion of your afternoon on any given day might be taken up by a seemingly trivial, yet apparently constitutionally vital, consultation with the master of the royal wardrobe. He will solemnly present you with dozens of swatches of luxurious imported fabric, velvets, silks, cloth of gold, for your next 50 doublets and hose, a series of decisions of seemingly earth-shattering importance to him and of almost cosmic tedium to you. After a suitable period of feigned kingly deliberation, you learn to point a decisive royal finger at a bolt of crimson velvet and make a grand, kingly pronouncement like, "That one, we are pleased," primarily just to make the fussing, bowing man and his endless fabric samples finally go away, so you can get on with the more interesting business of, say, planning a hunt or reading a report on new naval fortifications. And so the days, the weeks, the months of your early promising reign begin to take on this stately, deeply ingrained, and largely unvarying rhythm. It is a life of immense, almost unimaginable privilege and power, yes, that is undeniable. But it is also, you are discovering, a life of profound, almost suffocating, and deeply predictable routine. But even a great king, even a vibrant Renaissance prince, cannot live on state papers, tedious council meetings, and overwrought ceremonial dinners alone. There must be moments of release, of vigorous physical activity, of personal, intellectual, or artistic passion, pursuits that, while offering a semblance of leisure, also serve to craft and project a different, more dynamic, and perhaps more personally satisfying image of the ideal Renaissance king. And so the days, the weeks, and indeed the months and years of your early reign as King Henry VIII begin to take on that stately, deeply ingrained, and largely unvarying rhythm. It is a life of immense, almost unimaginable privilege and power. Yes, that is undeniable, but it is also, as you are swiftly discovering, a life of profound, almost suffocating, and deeply predictable routine, a relentless cycle of solemn decrees to be considered, formal dinners to be endured, and the ever-watchful, quill-wielding officials who meticulously record your every public move. But even a great king, even a vibrant Renaissance prince, bursting with youthful energy, cannot and will not live on state papers, tedious council meetings, and overwrought ceremonial dinners alone. There must be moments of release, of vigorous physical activity, of personal, intellectual, or artistic passion, pursuits that, while offering a semblance of royal leisure, also serve to craft and project a different, more dynamic, and perhaps more personally satisfying image of the ideal Renaissance monarch. When the seemingly endless procession of official duties finally allows, you throw yourself into your pastimes with the same formidable energy you bring to everything else. Chief among these, particularly in your youth and prime, is the hunt. Imagine the crisp, cool air of an early morning in one of your vast royal forests, perhaps near Windsor or Richmond Palace. The courtyard is alive with organized chaos, the stamping and whinnying of fine horses, the eager yelping and baying of your prized hunting hounds, the sharp, cheerful notes of hunting horns echoing in the misty air, and the bustling activity of countless grooms, beaters, and noble companions, all dressed in their distinctive green hunting livery. The hunt is more than just a sport for you. It is a physical release, a strategic military exercise in miniature, and a powerful display of kingly prowess and vitality. You are an excellent horseman, a strong and fearless rider, and the thrill of the chase, the thunder of hooves over the forest floor, as you pursue a magnificent red deer hart or a fierce tusked wild boar, is a potent antidote to the stale air and droning voices of the council chamber. Even more spectacular and more central to your public image as a chivalric king are the grand tournaments and jousts that you so dearly love and at which you excel. Picture the vibrant pageantry, the brightly colored pavilions and silken banners fluttering in the breeze, the sound of trumpets and the roar of the crowd, the heralds in their magnificent tabards announcing the names and titles of the noble combatants. You, the king, enter the lists clad in magnificent, intricately decorated, and incredibly heavy steel plate armor, your horse equally well adorned. This is the ultimate stage for displaying your strength, your skill, your courage, and your magnificence, both to your own court and to the assembled foreign ambassadors, who will send detailed reports of your prowess back to their own sovereigns. The main event, the joust, is a moment of intense, focused energy. The thunder of two heavily armored knights on massive war horses charging towards each other down the length of the tilt, the explosive, splintering crack of lance upon shield, the sheer skill required to stay seated and score a point on your opponent. It is, you might reflect with a wry, internal smile, the 16th century equivalent of a very, very aggressive and extremely expensive stress ball. For many years, these tournaments are a defining feature of your court, a glorious celebration of martial skill and chivalric honor. But your passions are not confined to the saddle and the sporting field. In the quieter moments, in the privacy of your royal apartments, you reveal a different, more refined and sensitive side to your character. You are a genuinely accomplished and passionate musician. Your early education in this area was not merely a princely accomplishment to be checked off a list. It is a true and lifelong love. You play several instruments with considerable skill: the gentle, introspective lute, the more formal virginals or harpsichord, the recorder, and even the great, complex chapel organ. You also compose your own music, both vocal and instrumental pieces. A significant number of your compositions survive to this day, the most famous of which is the song Pastime with Good Company, a piece which perfectly encapsulates your youthful zest for life. The enduring myth that you also composed the famous tune Greensleeves, however, is almost certainly untrue. Its musical style points to a later Elizabethan origin. You maintain a large and highly skilled court musical establishment, including the justly famous choir of the Chapel Royal, whose beautiful polyphonic singing enriches your daily worship and entertains your court. And then there is the other, surprisingly serious pastime that occupies a great deal of your time and intellectual energy: theology. This is no mere hobby. Your early rigorous education has instilled in you a deep, genuine, and rather opinionated interest in the great religious questions of your age. You are not content to simply let your bishops and archbishops handle such matters. You spend long hours in your royal library, a vast and growing collection of precious manuscripts and printed books, poring over the works of the Church Fathers, the arguments of scholastic philosophers, and the latest controversial pamphlets emerging from the Protestant Reformation in Germany. You enjoy engaging in deep, often lengthy theological debates with learned men like your friend Sir Thomas More or your powerful minister, Cardinal Wolsey. This intellectual pursuit is a core part of your identity as a learned Renaissance prince. You see yourself not just as a king, but as a defender of the true faith, a role you take so seriously, as we've noted, that you personally author a detailed theological treatise passionately defending the 7 sacraments against the attacks of Martin Luther. Your courtiers, you suspect, have to be remarkably multi-talented to keep up, right? They might whisper to each other in the corridors. So this morning, we must be sure to look deeply impressed by His Majesty's magnificent performance in the jousting lists. This afternoon, we must offer rapturous, if suitably humble, praise for his latest musical composition for 3 lutes and a recorder. And this evening, after supper, we must prepare to look incredibly thoughtful and profoundly convinced by his lengthy 2-hour argument about the precise theological nature of transubstantiation. It is, one must admit, rather exhausting keeping up with His Majesty's many and varied talents. Tudor historians often debate the primary motivation behind your famously deep engagement with theology. Was it a truly genuine, pious, and scholarly interest, befitting a well-educated Renaissance prince who had, after all, been initially trained for a potential career in the church? Was it primarily a political tool, a way of asserting your own royal authority in spiritual matters and justifying your later, more famous ecclesiastical actions? Or was it perhaps a powerful manifestation of your famously large and rather formidable ego, an intense desire to prove yourself intellectually superior to all your contemporaries, including and especially a rebellious German monk named Martin Luther? The truth, as is so often the case, is probably a complex and inseparable mixture of all 3. These varied and vigorous pastimes, the hunt, the tournament, the music, the theological debate, as well as simpler pleasures like playing tennis, bowling, or games of dice and cards, provide a necessary release from the tedious grind of daily administration. They are a way for you to shape your own kingly image, to display your magnificence, and to satisfy the passions of your energetic mind and body, far beyond the confines of the council chamber and the endless river of state papers. But as the years of your early golden reign begin to roll on, a deep, persistent, and intensely personal problem, one that no amount of jousting prowess or musical talent can solve, begins to cast a long and increasingly dark shadow over the tournaments, the hunts, and the music. It is a matter of state, of dynasty, and ultimately of your own soul that will come to dominate your thoughts, consume your considerable energies, and set in motion a long, frustrating, and truly epic period of waiting and uncertainty. The problem, in a word, is succession. You are King Henry VIII, and you have been married for many years now to your queen, the devout and dignified Catherine of Aragon. She has given you a child, a healthy and intelligent daughter, the Princess Mary. But after numerous difficult pregnancies and heartbreaking losses, it has become painfully terrifyingly clear that she will bear you no more children, and crucially, she has not given you a son. For the Tudor dynasty, still so new, its claim to the throne forged in the bloody civil strife of the Wars of the Roses less than a generation ago, the lack of a clear male heir is not just a personal disappointment, it is a grave political crisis in the making. The fear that upon your death, the kingdom could once again dissolve into a brutal civil war between competing claimants haunts you and your council. Those varied and vigorous pastimes, the thunderous excitement of the hunt and the joust, the quiet intellectual satisfaction of musical composition and theological study, provide a necessary release, a way for you to shape your magnificent kingly image and to satisfy the deep passions of your energetic mind and formidable body far beyond the confines of the council chamber and its endless river of state papers. But as the years of your early reign continue to roll onward, a deep, persistent, and intensely personal problem, one that no amount of jousting prowess or musical talent can ever hope to solve, begins to cast a long and increasingly dark shadow over the tournaments, the hunts, and the music. It is a matter of state, a matter of dynasty, and ultimately, in your own mind, a matter of your very soul that will come to dominate your thoughts, consume your considerable energies, and set in motion a long, frustrating, and truly epic period of waiting and deep, soul-grinding uncertainty. You become utterly convinced with the force of both kingly desire and what you believe to be a genuinely troubled conscience, that your marriage is invalid, that it is blighted in the eyes of God. The justification for this belief stems from the fact that Catherine was, however briefly, your elder brother Arthur's wife. To marry her yourself required a special papal dispensation, a formal permission from the Pope, which was granted at the time based on the assertion that her first marriage was never consummated. But now you look to Scripture, specifically to a passage in the book of Leviticus that states a man who takes his brother's wife shall be childless, and you see it as a divine curse, the clear reason for your lack of a male heir. Your marriage, you conclude, must be annulled. It must be declared null and void, as if it never truly existed. And so begins what will come to be known as the King's Great Matter, a quest that you likely assume in your youthful confidence and with your supreme royal authority will be resolved with swiftness and dispatch. You are, after all, the King of England, a defender of the faith. You simply require the Pope to acknowledge the legal and theological correctness of your position and grant the annulment. It seems, at first, a straightforward enough administrative and religious procedure. It will prove to be anything but. It will become a years-long, mind-numbing, and paperwork-laden diplomatic wrestling match. Your first, most obvious step is to appeal to the Pope in Rome, who at this time is Clement VII. He, and he alone, holds the power to annul your marriage. But your timing, through no fault of your own, could not possibly be worse. In the year 1527, the armies of the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, have run rampant through Italy and have brutally sacked the city of Rome itself. The Pope, Clement VII, is now, for all intents and purposes, a prisoner of the Emperor, and the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, you must remember, just so happens to be Queen Catherine's beloved and very powerful nephew. Charles is not, under any circumstances, going to stand idly by and permit his aunt to be cast aside in disgrace and his young cousin, Princess Mary, to be declared illegitimate by a cowed and politically captive pope. This is the great, immovable geopolitical obstacle upon which your desires will repeatedly break. Thus begins the interminable, frustrating process of diplomacy and theological wrangling. An endless stream of letters and official dispatches begins to flow between your court in England and the papal court in Rome, carried by slow ships and weary horsemen, your most trusted ambassadors and legal experts. Clever men like Stephen Gardiner and William Knight are dispatched to Rome to argue your case, to persuade, to cajole, and perhaps even to subtly threaten the papal authorities. They engage in frustrating, painfully slow-moving, and ultimately fruitless negotiations. Their detailed reports sent back to you, filled with diplomatic platitudes, delays, and endless prevarication from the papal court. Back in England, you commission the finest scholars and theologians from your universities at Oxford and Cambridge to compile vast, complex arguments in your favor, searching ancient texts, obscure papal decrees, and the dense thickets of canon law for any precedent, any loophole, any justification for your case. Imagine the tedious labor. Scholars hunched over dusty manuscripts by candlelight, meticulously building a legal and religious case that the king's first marriage was, in fact, biblically unsound. The whole affair, you find, becomes the 16th century equivalent of being stuck in the world's most infuriating and hopelessly bureaucratic customer service loop. You keep stating your case. You are told it is being looked into. You are transferred from one cardinal to another, each one promising to give the matter their fullest attention. And then you are effectively put on hold for several years, with only increasingly irritating lute music for company in the long, quiet evenings. As a supposed compromise, after much diplomatic back and forth, the Pope eventually agrees to send a special representative, a papal legate named Cardinal Campeggio, to England to hear your case in a special legatine court, alongside your own chief minister, the powerful and usually highly effective Cardinal Wolsey. This court finally convenes in London in the summer of 1529, and for a moment, your hopes are raised, but it too descends into a mire of legalistic debate and procedural delays. The sessions are long and formal, filled with the droning reading of lengthy documents in Latin, the presentation of dense theological arguments, and the careful, formal examination of canon law. The court's most dramatic moment comes when Queen Catherine herself makes a powerful, dignified, and deeply uncomfortable public appeal directly to you, on her knees, asserting the validity of her marriage and her honor as your true wife, before walking defiantly out of the court. The entire event is a piece of high political theater, and ultimately, a disaster for your cause. After weeks of tedious proceedings, Cardinal Campeggio, citing the need to follow the procedural calendar of the courts in Rome, declares the court adjourned for the summer, effectively referring the entire matter back to Rome, precisely where it started. The frustration is immense. This period of your life becomes the great wait. Years pass, and the great matter remains unresolved, a constant, irritating thorn in your royal side, a source of deep anxiety for the future of your kingdom and your dynasty. You have probably, by this point, read so many dense theological arguments about the precise definition of canonical affinity and the historical precedent for various Levitical curses that you could confidently debate Thomas Aquinas himself to a complete and utter standstill. A formidable intellectual skill, that is, you have to admit, only moderately useful for planning your next successful hunting trip or composing a cheerful song for the virginals. Historians, of course, continue to debate the primary single driver of your relentless quest for this annulment. Was it a genuine, deeply felt crisis of religious conscience, a true belief that you were living in sin by being married to your brother's widow, as you so often publicly claimed? Was it a cold, pragmatic, and desperate political necessity to secure a male heir and thus safeguard the future of the Tudor dynasty from another bloody civil war? Or was it, as many have argued, driven primarily by your burgeoning, all-consuming passion for a captivating young lady of the court, Anne Boleyn, who, unlike other royal mistresses, astutely refused to be merely your mistress and would settle for nothing less than being your wife and queen? The historical reality, as is so often the case, is likely an inseparable, deeply complex, and entirely human tangle of all three powerful motivations, each one reinforcing the others. The papal bureaucracy, you begin to suspect, with a growing sense of royal impatience, seems to be running on a completely different, almost geological, timeline, one where an urgent and deeply pressing royal matter is probably filed somewhere between considering a minor reform to the liturgical calendar for the year 1750 inches and debating the official classification of a new species of angel. And so the years continue to drag on, a slow, agonizing, almost unbearable crawl of diplomatic frustration, legal wrangling, and profound theological stalemate. The great matter, your great matter, remains stubbornly, maddeningly unresolved, a constant, irritating, and deeply unsettling preoccupation. But a king, especially a king, as energetic, as impatient, and as profoundly ambitious as you, Henry VIII, cannot simply sit and wait indefinitely for foreign prelates to decide his destiny and the future of his kingdom, while your frustrated envoys in Rome continue to wrestle with the labyrinthine intricacies of papal bureaucracy. Your own restless, formidable energy must inevitably find an outlet. It begins to turn, with a new sense of purpose, to grand projects of stone and mortar, to the creation of magnificent palaces and impressive royal fortifications, places where you can, at the very least, see some tangible, immediate, and royally impressive results for your powerful commands. And so the long, frustrating years of the great matter continue to drag on, a slow, agonizing, almost unbearable crawl of tedious diplomatic frustration and circular theological stalemate. The great matter of your annulment remains stubbornly, maddeningly unresolved, a constant, irritating, and deeply unsettling thorn in your royal side, a cloud of uncertainty that hangs heavy over your court and your kingdom. But a king, especially a king as famously energetic, as impatient, and as profoundly ambitious as you, Henry VIII, cannot simply sit and wait indefinitely for foreign prelates and a captive pope to decide his personal destiny and the future of his dynasty, while your increasingly weary envoys in Rome continue to wrestle with the labyrinthine intricacies of papal bureaucracy. Your own restless, formidable energy must inevitably find a more satisfying outlet. It begins to turn, with a new and determined sense of purpose, towards grand, tangible projects of stone and mortar, to the creation of magnificent palaces and impressive royal fortifications, impressive building projects where you can, at the very least, see some immediate, concrete, and royally impressive results for your powerful commands. Your motivation for this building craze is manifold. It is, of course, a way to display your undeniable magnificence, your power, and your immense wealth, especially to your great European rivals, like the equally ambitious and style-conscious King Francis I of France. Your palaces are a direct reflection of your status, a key part of the international competition in prestige and grandeur. They are also a way for you to create a tangible, lasting legacy, to literally stamp your Tudor mark upon the landscape of England. And on a more personal level, the immense and complex task of planning and overseeing these vast construction projects provides a welcome and absorbing distraction from the infuriating diplomatic stalemate of your annulment proceedings. Here, at least, your will is absolute, your commands are obeyed, and progress, however slow, is visible day by day. And so the work begins. It's a mainstream historical fact that you, Henry VIII, were one of England's most prolific and obsessive royal builders. Over the course of your long reign, you would commission, acquire, or significantly rebuild more than 50 royal residences, using them to project your power to indulge your passion for architectural novelty and to accommodate your large, perpetually itinerant court. You take over York Place, the magnificent London residence of your then Chief Minister Cardinal Wolsey, and begin transforming it into the sprawling palace of Whitehall, which would eventually become the largest royal palace in all of Europe. You acquire another of Wolsey's properties, the already impressive Hampton Court, and begin a massive, decades-long project of expansion and rebuilding, adding grand new staterooms, vast kitchens, and magnificent chapels. Perhaps your most ambitious project is Nonsuch Palace in Surrey, built from the ground up at phenomenal expense. Its very name declares its purpose. There should be none such palace to equal it in all the world. This is not primarily a practical residence. It is a fantastical statement piece, an architectural marvel designed to dazzle and impress all who see it. You spend your mornings, perhaps, arguing with your royal treasurer about the seemingly endless cost of it all. You can just imagine his permanent throbbing migraine as he tries to balance the royal books. Your Majesty, he might plead internally, another entirely new ceiling of gilded plasterwork. Might I perhaps humbly suggest a very nice and considerably more cost-effective coat of traditional whitewash instead? This, you can be sure, is a question he has learned, through hard experience, never ever to actually ask aloud. The boring, day-to-day process of the 16th century construction is a slow, ponderous, and incredibly complex affair. First come the plans. You would spend hours poring over architectural drawings, painstakingly rendered on large sheets of parchment by your master craftsmen, perhaps making your own kingly suggestions and modifications with a charcoal stick. You would consult with your chief officials for royal works, men like the king's master mason, on every detail, from the layout of the grand halls to the placement of the privy chambers. You spend your mornings, it sometimes seems, arguing with the Pope's legates about the finer points of theology, and your afternoons arguing with your master mason about the structural integrity of a proposed new roof for the royal tennis court. It's all about high-stakes negotiation, just with different kinds of very stubborn stonework involved. Then begins the immense logistical challenge of sourcing the materials. Vast quantities of fine stone must be quarried and transported, often over long distances. Countless acres of ancient oak forest must be felled to provide the massive timbers for the roofs and floors. Huge numbers of bricks are fired in specially built kilns. Great sheets of lead are required for the roofing and plumbing, and immense quantities of glass, still a considerable luxury at this time, are needed for the thousands of new windows that are a hallmark of your modern palaces. All these materials must be moved, slowly and laboriously, by river barges and by long trains of creaking, ox-drawn carts along the rudimentary roads of Tudor England. You must also manage the huge teams of skilled and unskilled labor required for such projects. Hundreds, even thousands of stonemasons, carpenters, bricklayers, glaziers, plasterers, painters, carvers, gardeners, and simple manual laborers are employed, their work proceeding at the slow, deliberate pace of hand tools and human muscle. For a project like Nonsuch, you even import highly skilled foreign artisans, particularly from Italy and France, to create the latest, most fashionable decorations. These include incredibly elaborate exterior stucco plasterwork, depicting dynamic scenes from classical mythology and Roman history. It's the 16th century equivalent of covering the entire exterior of your house in incredibly detailed, exquisitely rendered, and astronomically expensive, custom-designed wallpaper. A subtle and understated statement of royal wealth and sophistication it is most certainly not. Architectural historians today continue to debate the full extent of your own personal involvement and direct aesthetic influence on these many ambitious building projects. They question how much of the final design of a palace like Nonsuch was a true reflection of your own kingly taste and Renaissance ideals, versus how much was driven by the specific vision and technical expertise of the master craftsmen and surveyors you employed. Men like James Needham, or the talented Italian artist and architect Nicholas Bellin of Modena, who were instrumental in translating your grand ambitions into physical reality. You, as king, would not be a distant, hands-off funder. You would take a keen and active interest, frequently visiting the construction sites on horseback to inspect the progress, to approve details, to encourage the workers, and to make your powerful presence felt. These visits provide a welcome distraction, a sense of real, tangible control, an immediate, visible achievement that stands in stark, therapeutic contrast to the frustrating, intangible, and seemingly endless diplomatic stalemate of your great matter with the papacy in Rome. This is the ultimate, most magnificent grand designs project imaginable. There is no fixed, restrictive budget, save for the limits of your entire kingdom's treasury. The only planning permission required is your own royal will, and the final, triumphant reveal involves not just a quiet glass of Prosecco with your slightly stressed-out architect, but a series of magnificent state banquets and international tournaments to show off your new creation to the entire world. And so, as the magnificent stone and timber walls of your glorious new palaces slowly, painstakingly, and at truly phenomenal expense rise towards the heavens, they are more than just a kingly distraction, a personal indulgence, or a mere display of political power. They are a powerful, enduring statement in stone, brick, and timber of your unwavering will, your magnificent vision, and your absolute determination to create a world that reflects your own sense of grandeur. But these vast, glittering, and increasingly comfortable shells of royal ambition are not meant to stand silent and empty. They are built specifically to house your great and itinerant court, a veritable moving city of hundreds, sometimes even thousands of people. And that, brings with it an entirely different and equally colossal set of relentless daily and often surprisingly mundane logistical challenges. This enormous organization is by necessity highly bureaucratic, a complex machine with its own distinct departments and rigid hierarchies, all designed to ensure the smooth, or at least the semi-functional running of your daily life and the projection of your royal power. The entire household is broadly divided into two main spheres. There is the above-stairs world, managed by your Lord Chamberlain, which encompasses all the public and ceremonial aspects of your life. The opulent staterooms, the semi-private privy chamber, where you conduct much of your business, the elaborate court ceremonies, and all matters of royal etiquette and public presentation. Then there is the below-stairs world, presided over by the Lord Steward. This is the vast domestic engine room of the court, responsible for everything required to feed, water, warm, and house this small army of people. Its departments include the great kitchens, the wine cellars, the bakeries, the breweries, the stables, the laundries, and the workshops of the various craftsmen. Each of these departments has its own hierarchy of officials, clerks, yeomen, and grooms, and each generates its own endless stream of meticulous, if often rather confusing, account books. And so, as the magnificent stone and timber walls of your glorious new palaces slowly, painstakingly, and at truly phenomenal expense rise towards the English heavens, they are more than just a kingly distraction from your diplomatic frustrations, a personal indulgence in architectural grandeur, or a mere display of political power. They are a powerful, enduring statement in stone, brick, and timber of your unwavering will, your magnificent vision, and your absolute determination to create a physical world that reflects your own profound sense of royal majesty. But these vast, glittering, and increasingly comfortable shells of kingly ambition are not meant to stand silent and empty. They are built specifically to house your great and perpetually itinerant court, a veritable moving city of hundreds, sometimes even thousands of people. And that, you know from daily wearying experience, brings with it an entirely different and equally colossal set of relentless, time-consuming, and often surprisingly mundane logistical challenges. You reign not just over a kingdom, but over this vast, sprawling, ever-hungry, and constantly moving beast that is your royal household. The sheer scale of it is almost difficult to comprehend. Your court is not simply your immediate family and a few high-ranking nobles. It is a teeming, hierarchical community that might, at any given time, number between 800 and 1,500 people. This includes a vast array of courtiers, high-ranking officials of state, ladies-in-waiting, privy councillors, household administrators, clerks, priests and choristers of the chapel royal, physicians, bodyguards, grooms, stable hands, craftsmen, cooks, scullions, pages, laundresses, and a seemingly endless legion of other servants, each with their own specific and often minutely defined role. And this entire, bustling community is perpetually on the move with you, progressing from Greenwich to Westminster, from Windsor to Hampton Court, requiring a logistical operation of almost military precision and complexity. Managing the Tudor court, you often think, is like being the chief executive officer of a massive, mobile, all-inclusive, 5-star luxury resort that also happens to be the nation's central government, and where most of your high-ranking guests are heavily armed and quite possibly discreetly plotting against each other. It makes modern event planning, one might imagine, look like a rather simple, relaxing piece of cake. The task of simply catering for this court is a monumental, almost daily, logistical miracle, feeding over 1,000 people. At least 2 substantial meals a day requires an operation of staggering scale. Your great kitchens, like the famous ones you had built at Hampton Court, are vast, cavernous spaces with multiple enormous fireplaces, each capable of roasting several whole oxen at once. They are a hive of frantic, organized activity, a hot, noisy, and perpetually smoky world populated by an army of white-aproned cooks, sweating scullions, butchers, bakers, and pastry chefs, all working under the stern command of the master cook. Sourcing the sheer volume of food required is a constant preoccupation for the officials of the household. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Eltham Ordinances, a detailed set of regulations issued by your then Chief Minister Cardinal Wolsey in 1526 in an attempt to reform and manage the finances of your household, provide a fascinating insight into its sheer scale. The accounts show the court consuming literally thousands of gallons of ale and wine, dozens upon dozens of oxen, hundreds of sheep, thousands of chickens, and countless other birds, fish, and game animals in the course of a single year. You imagine the clerk of the royal kitchen probably has a permanent stress-induced migraine from simply trying to manage his daily shopping list, a document which must be at least 50 feet long and likely begins each morning with item 120 large oxen, 100 plump sheep, 3,000 assorted eggs. He probably develops a nervous twitch every time you casually announce that you're having a few foreign dignitaries over for dinner next week. And then there is the controlled chaos of the royal progress, when your entire court packs up and moves from one palace to another. This is a logistical nightmare of epic proportions. It involves painstakingly taking down, cataloging and packing up all the royal fineries, the priceless tapestries that adorn the walls, the vast quantities of silver and gold plate for dining, your own royal bed and its magnificent hangings, the robes and vestments of the chapel royal, the furniture for the state apartments, and crucially, the entire ever-growing archive of state documents and the privy purse itself. This mountain of material, along with the personal baggage of every single courtier and servant, is loaded onto a vast train of hundreds of creaking, heavily laden carts, which then trundles slowly and ponderously across the rudimentary roads of the English countryside, creating a spectacle of royal power, but also causing immense disruption wherever it goes, often stripping the local landscape of food and supplies, like a swarm of very well-dressed, very demanding locusts. The organizational chart for the royal household, you sometimes think, probably looks less like a neat, orderly pyramid and more like a particularly chaotic, sprawling spider's web that was spun by a very ambitious but slightly confused and possibly quite anxious spider. And you, the king, are the magnificent, if sometimes rather overwhelmed, royal fly, sitting right in the very middle of it all. Beneath the high-ranking, great nobles who serve you as Lord Chamberlain or Lord Steward, there exists a vast, intricate ecosystem of specialized, often quite peculiar, courtly jobs. There is, most famously, the groom of the stool, the man who attends to your most private and personal needs in the royal privy. This, far from being a lowly position, is actually a role of immense prestige and intimate access to the king, often held by a trusted friend and confidant. But there are also clerks of the spicery, yeomen of the ewery, who look after your linen and water for washing, sergeants of the royal scullery, and perhaps even a purveyor of the king's confectionery, a very serious man whose entire professional life revolves around ensuring that your candied fruits are of a sufficiently regal quality and your marzipan sculptures are structurally sound. It seems every single aspect of your daily existence, however trivial, requires its own dedicated department, its own specific official, and its own meticulously kept, if seldom read, account book. And so, you reign not just over a kingdom of cities, towns, and shires, but also over this vast, sprawling, and ever-hungry internal beast that is your royal court, managing its intricate, often competing, hierarchies, its colossal, insatiable appetite, and its perpetual, cumbersome motion is, in itself, a daily, relentless exercise in administrative endurance and kingly patience. But while this complex internal world of courtly catering and barely controlled chaos demands your constant, wearying attention, the equally complex and far more perilous world beyond the shores of England, the world of ambitious foreign kings, a beleaguered pope, and a mighty Holy Roman Emperor, requires a different, but no less demanding, and far more delicate, kind of management. Historians, who study the intricate structure of the Tudor court, often debate the actual day-to-day efficiency of its large and undeniably complex household. They question whether it was, in fact, a well-oiled, perfectly hierarchical machine, effectively projecting royal power and magnificence as intended, or if it was, in reality, a frequently chaotic, notoriously wasteful, and intensely faction-ridden environment that was a constant source of administrative, political, and above all, financial headaches for the monarch who presided over it. And so, you reign not just over a kingdom of English cities, towns, and shires, but also over that vast, sprawling, and ever-hungry internal beast that is your royal court, managing its intricate, often competing hierarchies, its colossal, insatiable appetite, and its perpetual, cumbersome motion is, in itself, a daily, relentless exercise in administrative endurance and kingly patience. But while this complex internal world of courtly catering and barely controlled chaos demands your constant, wearying attention, the equally complex and far more perilous world beyond the shores of your island kingdom, the world of ambitious foreign kings, a beleaguered pope, and a mighty Holy Roman Emperor, requires a different but no less demanding and far more delicate kind of management. You must now engage in the slow, ponderous, protocol-laden, and often deeply frustrating dance of 16th century European diplomacy. The first thing you learn about international relations in your era is its almost unimaginable slowness. In a world without telegraphs, telephones, or the instant gratification of electronic mail, every single communication, every query, every instruction, every subtle threat or veiled promise must be painstakingly written out by hand, sealed with wax, and entrusted to a courier on horseback or a captain of a ship. An urgent question sent to your ambassador at the Spanish court might not receive a reply for many weeks, or even months, depending on the roads, the weather, and the general prevalence of pirates or highwaymen. This means that you are constantly making critical decisions based on information that is already weeks out of date, operating in a state of perpetual low-grade uncertainty, trying to guess what your rivals are thinking now based on what they were reported to be thinking 6 weeks ago. The great stage of Europe is dominated by a few key, larger-than-life players. There is you, Henry VIII, the ambitious and increasingly powerful King of England. There is Francis I, the flamboyant and equally ambitious King of France, your great rival in magnificence, in culture, and often in military conflict. And then there is the most powerful ruler in all of Christendom, the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, who is not only the emperor, but also the King of Spain, ruler of the Netherlands, and lord of vast territories in the New World. And of course, complicating absolutely everything for you, he is Queen Catherine's devoted and very influential nephew. Caught between these mighty secular rulers is the Pope, currently Clement VII, a man who is not only the spiritual head of Western Christendom, but also a temporal Italian prince, frequently caught in the crossfire of the great power politics between France and the Habsburg Empire. Your tools for navigating this complex landscape are limited and formal. Your primary instruments are letters, an endless stream of them. They are magnificent documents, written on fine, expensive parchment in elegant looping script, usually in the diplomatic languages of Latin or French. They are filled with elaborate, almost comically florid titles and honorifics and professions of eternal brotherly love and undying friendship to fellow monarchs whom you actively distrust and may even be secretly planning to go to war with next Tuesday. Each one is sealed with your impressive royal wax seal, its breaking by the recipient a small ceremony in itself. You spend countless hours in council, dictating the precise wording of these letters, or reading the equally elaborate and often deliberately ambiguous replies from your royal brothers. Your eyes and ears in these foreign courts are your ambassadors, your legates and envoys. These men, usually high-ranking churchmen or trusted nobles, live a precarious and stressful existence, their job being to faithfully represent your interests, to negotiate on your behalf, to pick up useful court gossip and intelligence, and to send you back long, incredibly detailed, and often rather dull dispatches on the political climate. You, in turn, must spend many more hours reading these dispatches, trying to decipher the true meaning behind the formal diplomatic language. You suspect your ambassadors spend about half their time gathering vital state intelligence and the other half trying to find a decent, palatable meal in a foreign court and writing long, complaining letters home about the terrible state of the local plumbing. To formalize relationships, you engage in treaties and form leagues. The map of Europe is a constantly shifting chessboard of alliances. The League of Cognac, the Treaty of Cambrai, the list goes on. These are complex legal documents, painstakingly negotiated by your ministers and ambassadors over months or even years, full of clauses and subclauses detailing military commitments, trade agreements, and royal marriage arrangements. Most of them, you've come to learn, have a shelf life considerably shorter than that of a good cheddar cheese. On very rare occasions, you meet your fellow monarchs face to face. Your famous summit with Francis Sag in 1520, the Field of the Cloth of Gold, was one such event. But this was less a friendly meeting and more an incredibly expensive, 2-week-long diplomatic performance, a carefully orchestrated pageant of competitive magnificence. Every single detail, from the size of your respective retinues to the quality of the tapestry hanging in your temporary palace, was a subject of intense negotiation and national pride. The actual diplomatic results of this spectacular and bank-breaking event were in the end almost negligible, a perfect illustration of the fluid, often deeply cynical, and show-driven nature of alliances in your time. Every single interaction in this world is governed by a strict, almost suffocating code of protocol. When receiving a foreign ambassador, the precise ceremony is of paramount importance. Who stands where, who bows first, the exact number of steps one takes to approach the throne, all these things are laden with meaning and are fiercely guarded. The language used is almost always indirect, relying on metaphor, allusion, and polite understatement. You might spend an entire afternoon listening to a Spanish ambassador deliver a beautiful hour-long speech on the shared love of chivalry between you and his master, Emperor Charles V, when what he actually means is, the emperor is extremely displeased about your current plan to divorce his aunt and would like you to stop it immediately, or there will be very serious trouble. It can be exhausting. Diplomatic historians continue to assess your effectiveness. Henry VIII, as a foreign policy strategist, they debate whether your actions on the European stage were largely reactive and driven almost entirely by your own very personal dynastic concerns, most notably the great matter of your annulment, or if you were, in fact, pursuing a more consistent, long-term and sophisticated balance of power policy, skillfully playing France and the Habsburg Empire off against each other, with the aim of preventing either one from becoming so overwhelmingly dominant that it could threaten England's own security and growing influence. Sometimes, a bit of intrigue can liven up the tedious stream of official mail. Your chief secretary, a man with a perpetually worried expression and a deep understanding of ciphers, might present you with a letter from your agent in Rome that on the surface appears to be a rather dull scholarly treatise on ancient Roman pottery styles, but by applying a specific pre-arranged cipher, perhaps something involving every 7th word, counting backwards and holding the parchment up to a candle flame, it reveals a secret and much more interesting report on the Pope's latest anxieties, his private opinion on Cardinal Wolsey's lavish lifestyle, and his profound dislike of English beer. It's an incredibly slow, cumbersome, and inefficient way to gather intelligence, but it does add a certain satisfying intellectual puzzle to the otherwise often monotonous business of reading your royal mail. And so, you find yourself completely enmeshed in this slow, ponderous, and often deeply, profoundly frustrating international dance of letters, leagues, and legates, a high-stakes game of shifting alliances, veiled threats, and hollow, elegantly worded promises. And your greatest, most pressing diplomatic challenge, the great matter of your annulment from Queen Catherine, remains stubbornly, infuriatingly blocked by these very political and diplomatic forces. As it becomes increasingly painfully clear that the Pope, under the watchful eye of the Emperor, will not, or simply cannot, grant your most fervent desire, your royal gaze begins to turn inward. You start looking away from the distant courts of Europe and towards the vast, ancient, and immensely wealthy religious institutions established within your own kingdom, a shift in focus that will prompt a domestic decision with truly earth-shattering consequences, and which will, in its own turn, generate a truly colossal, almost unimaginable amount of new and very different administrative paperwork. And so you find yourself completely, almost hopelessly, enmeshed in that slow, ponderous, and often deeply frustrating international dance of diplomatic letters, shifting, untrustworthy leagues, and evasive papal legates. It is a high-stakes, glacially paced game of political chess played across the map of Europe, a game of hollow promises, veiled threats, and elegantly worded deceptions. Your greatest and most pressing diplomatic challenge, the great matter of your annulment from Queen Catherine, remains stubbornly, infuriatingly blocked by these very international forces, most notably the unyielding political power of her nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, over the beleaguered Pope Clement VII, as it becomes increasingly, painfully clear that the Pope will not, or perhaps more accurately, simply cannot, grant your most fervent desire, your royal gaze, and your formidable, impatient will begin to turn inward. You start looking away from the distant, unhelpful courts of Europe and towards the vast, ancient, powerful, and immensely wealthy religious institutions established for centuries within your own kingdom of England. This inward turn will prompt a domestic decision with truly earth-shattering consequences, and which will, in its own turn, generate a truly colossal, almost unimaginable amount of new and very different, but equally tedious, administrative paperwork. The legal and spiritual foundation for this momentous shift is, of course, your decisive break with the authority of Rome. Frustrated beyond measure, you and your clever new chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, engineer a radical solution. Through a series of acts of parliament, you effectively sever the English Church from papal authority, culminating in the Act of Supremacy of 1534, which declares you, King Henry VIII, and your successors, to be the one and only supreme head on earth of the Church of England. This act places all ecclesiastical power, and crucially, all ecclesiastical wealth, directly under your royal control. The official, publicly stated rationale for what is to follow is one of pious reform. The monasteries, once great centers of learning and prayer, are now, your government argues, largely corrupt, decadent, and morally lax institutions, filled with idle monks and superstitious, unnecessary rituals. It is your solemn duty, as supreme head of the Church, to reform these decadent establishments and to redirect their considerable wealth towards more worthy, modern causes, such as the founding of new schools and colleges, or bolstering the kingdom's coastal defenses against foreign invasion. The unspoken, yet universally understood, primary motivation, however, is far more pragmatic. You are in desperate need of money to fund your lavish court, your ambitious building projects, and your foreign policy, and the English monasteries, taken together, represent one of the largest and wealthiest landowners in the entire kingdom. Before this great transfer of wealth can begin, however, a proper accounting must be made. Under the direction of Thomas Cromwell, a man with a genius for meticulous, systematic administration, you launch one of the most comprehensive national surveys in English history. In 1535, royal commissioners are dispatched to every corner of England and Wales to compile the Valor Ecclesiasticus, which translates as the value of the church. Imagine these teams of serious black-robed officials on horseback, armed with ink, parchment, and royal authority, visiting every single monastery, abbey, priory, and nunnery in the land. Their task is to create a detailed, exhaustive inventory of the entire wealth and property of the church. They meticulously record the extent of monastic lands, the income from agricultural rents, the tithes from affiliated parishes, the value of forests, mills, and fishing rights. They catalog the monastery's physical treasures, their silver and gold plate, their precious jewels, their rich vestments, and even the estimated income generated from pilgrims visiting their sacred relics. It is a doomsday book for the church, a monumental work of bureaucracy, accounting, and land surveying, the results of which fill several enormous, heavy volumes with dense, closely written script. The level of bureaucratic detail is both truly impressive in its scope and deeply, profoundly soporific in its content. Armed with this vast catalog of wealth, the process of dissolution begins. The first wave, initiated by an Act of Parliament in 1536, targets the smaller, supposedly more corrupt and less spiritually valuable monasteries with an annual income of under £200. Your royal visitors commissioners like the notoriously zealous Richard Leighton and Thomas Legge travel the country, visiting each of these smaller houses. Their job is to inspect the premises for evidence of decadence and corruption, and to persuade, or more accurately, to pressure and intimidate the abbots and priors into voluntarily surrendering their monasteries to the king. This is framed as a formal legalistic process, culminating in the signing of a deed of surrender, more paperwork to be filed away. This policy, unsurprisingly, is not universally popular, particularly in the more conservative northern parts of your kingdom. The dissolution of the lesser monasteries becomes a major catalyst for the Great Northern Uprising of 1536, the Pilgrimage of Grace. For a time, this presents a serious challenge to your authority, a major administrative and military problem that requires careful and ultimately ruthless handling. But the rebellion is eventually and firmly put down, and the process continues. Following the suppression of the Pilgrimage of Grace, the second wave of dissolutions begins, targeting the larger, wealthier, and more powerful abbeys and priories, who, seeing the writing on the wall, are now also persuaded to surrender voluntarily between 1537 and 1540. To manage the immense torrent of wealth and property now flowing to the crown from these hundreds of dissolved religious houses, you establish an entirely new government department in 1536, the Court of Augmentations. This is bureaucracy at its most raw and powerful. The court's sole purpose is to receive, manage, and dispose of all the former monastic assets. Its officials, clerks, and surveyors are soon overwhelmed by the sheer volume of work. Their primary tasks are to collect the revenues from the newly acquired lands and to crucially oversee the sale of much of this property to your loyal nobles, gentry, and wealthy merchants. This is done to raise immediate, desperately needed cash for your royal treasury, and also to bind these influential men more closely to your royal supremacy, as they now have a vested interest in ensuring the monasteries are never restored. The Court of Augmentations becomes a veritable factory of legal documents, churning out countless deeds of sale, property leases, and royal grants, each one requiring meticulous drafting, copying, and the application of numerous official seals. You imagine the newly established court probably has an unofficial motto, something like "In God We Trust." All others must bring duly signed deeds, certified surveys, and the appropriate royal warrants in triplicate. The physical process of dissolving the monasteries is equally systematic. Once surrendered, the monastic communities are disbanded. The monks and nuns are given small pensions and sent out into the world. Then the asset stripping begins. Royal commissioners oversee the removal of everything of value. The lead is stripped from the vast, magnificent abbey roofs and melted down. The great church bells are taken from their towers to be melted down for cannon. Any precious gold and silver plate, chalices, crucifixes, and jewels are carefully inventoried and sent under guard to the Tower of London to be added to the royal treasury. Even the vast monastic libraries, repositories of centuries of learning, are often broken up, their priceless illuminated manuscripts sold off, lost, or simply destroyed. The magnificent stone buildings themselves are often left to fall into picturesque ruin or granted to local nobles who might use them as a convenient quarry for their own building projects. Thomas Cromwell, your chief minister, essentially becomes the busiest and most effective real estate agent, demolition expert, and auctioneer in the entire kingdom, with a vast and unprecedented portfolio of characterful historic properties, some with original stained glass, many in need of immediate and extensive structural repair, all available for a very reasonable price to loyal and financially solvent supporters of the crown. Historians, of course, continue to debate the complex and far-reaching economic consequences of this dissolution of the monasteries. Some argue that it was a vital modernizing step that fueled the rise of a new, dynamic gentry class and greatly stimulated the English land market, paving the way for future agricultural and economic development. Others, however, contend that it was a chaotic, often brutally destructive, and culturally catastrophic asset-stripping exercise that led to significant social dislocation, the loss of invaluable cultural, artistic, and architectural heritage, and the destruction of the traditional systems of charity and social welfare that the monasteries, for all their faults, had long provided. And so, through this monumental, deeply controversial, and incredibly, almost overwhelmingly, bureaucratic process, the vast, ancient wealth of the English monasteries is systematically and irrevocably transferred to your royal coffers, fundamentally reshaping the financial, social, and religious landscape of your kingdom forever. It is a decisive, if often quite brutal, solution to your immediate and pressing financial woes, a solution born directly from the deep frustrations of your long-stalled great matter. Yet even this colossal undertaking, this dramatic re-engineering of your entire kingdom, does not, in the end, solve the central, private, and nagging anxiety of your reign, the one that started this whole tumultuous chain of events in the first place, the constant wearying and deeply personal worry of securing your Tudor dynasty through the often perilous and endlessly legally complex avenues of marriage and succession. The break with the authority of Rome does, of course, allow you to finally achieve your immediate goal, with yourself now established as the supreme head of the Church of England, your own hand-picked Archbishop of Canterbury. The reform-minded Thomas Cranmer is able to formally annul your long marriage to Catherine of Aragon. You are at last free to marry the woman for whom you have waited all these years, the clever, ambitious, and now pregnant Anne Boleyn. She is crowned queen with magnificent ceremony, and you await the birth of your child with fervent, prayerful hope that it will be the son and heir you so desperately crave. But when Queen Anne gives birth, it is to another daughter, the fiery-haired and bright-eyed Princess Elizabeth. She is a healthy child, A welcome addition, but she is not the longed-for prince. And when subsequent pregnancies end in disappointment and loss, that old, familiar Tudor anxiety begins to creep back into your heart and your court. A familiar, grim pattern begins to emerge. A cycle of hope, marriage, dynastic disappointment, and then the ruthless application of political and legal power to end one marital chapter and begin another, all in the relentless pursuit of a secure male heir. And so, through that monumental, deeply controversial, and incredibly, almost overwhelmingly, bureaucratic process of the dissolution of the monasteries, the vast, ancient wealth of the English Church is systematically and irrevocably transferred to your royal coffers. It is a decisive, if often quite brutal, solution to your immediate and pressing financial woes, a solution born directly from the deep frustrations and political necessities of your long-stalled great matter. Yet even this colossal undertaking, this dramatic re-engineering of the financial, religious, and social landscape of your entire kingdom, does not in the end solve the central, private, and nagging anxiety of your reign, the one that started this whole tumultuous chain of events in the first place. The constant wearying and deeply personal worry of securing your Tudor dynasty through the often perilous and endlessly legally complex avenues of marriage and succession. The dynastic problem now shifts. You have an heir, but he is just a single, fragile little boy. The need for spares, the very position you yourself once occupied, becomes apparent. And so the machinery of royal matchmaking grinds into motion once more, this time driven by international diplomacy. Your chief minister Thomas Cromwell arranges a match for you with the German princess, Anne of Cleves, intended to forge a strategic alliance with Protestant princes in Europe. This marriage, however, proves to be a spectacular failure on a personal level. You find your new bride, to put it mildly, not to your taste. The whole affair is treated not as a matter of the heart, but as a diplomatic contract gone wrong. A new, boring legal process is initiated, and the marriage is annulled after only a few months on the grounds of non-consummation, with the now dearly beloved sister of the king, Anne of Cleves, retiring comfortably to the English countryside. Almost immediately, you marry again, this time to the gentle, pale, and placid Jane Seymour. And for a brief, glorious period, it seems all your prayers have been answered. In October of 1537, Queen Jane gives birth to a son, the Prince Edward. The joy throughout the kingdom is immense. Cannons are fired, bells are rung, bonfires are lit. The Tudor dynasty, at long last, has its legitimate male heir. But this triumph is cruelly, tragically short-lived. Just days after the birth, Queen Jane succumbs to a fever and dies, leaving you a grieving widower, but also, for the first time, the father of a healthy prince. Your life, which the poets and balladeers might frame as a grand romance, or a series of passionate affairs, becomes, from a certain administrative and dynastic perspective, a rather repetitive and legally taxing exercise in royal problem-solving. Queen Anne, having failed in her primary duty to provide a son, and having alienated many powerful figures at court with her sharp tongue and reformist zeal, eventually falls from your favor. Accusations of treason are brought against her. A swift trial is held, and her marriage to you is formally annulled, rendering her daughter Elizabeth for a time illegitimate in the eyes of the law. Her end is swift and final, a grim public demonstration of your absolute power. Next, a marriage seemingly driven by passion to the young and vivacious Catherine Howard. But this too ends in disaster, when accusations of her treasonous infidelity surface. Another grim trial follows. Another queen meets a final public end. And finally, there is Catherine Parr, your sixth and final wife, a mature, pious, and sensible widow who acts more as a companion and a kindly nursemaid to you in your declining years, and as a unifying motherly figure to your 3 children, than as a player in the great dynastic game. Your marital history becomes less a story of romance and more a series of complex, high-stakes legal transactions, each with its own extensive paperwork, its own unique annulment clauses, and occasionally a very final, very non-negotiable, and legally sanctioned termination agreement. Underpinning this entire, almost bewildering succession of wives are your constant wills and worries, the relentless, deeply bureaucratic effort to control the future by legally defining the line of succession. This is where much of the real, tedious work of your later reign is focused. With each marriage, each birth, each annulment, each execution, the official line of succession must be formally, legally redefined. Parliament, at your command, is called upon to pass a series of different, often contradictory, acts of succession. The first act makes your eldest daughter Mary illegitimate and declares Anne Boleyn's future children to be the true heirs. Then, after Anne's fall, a second act declares her daughter Elizabeth also illegitimate, leaving the succession uncertain. A third act, following the birth of Prince Edward, places him firmly first in line. But then, in your later years, with Edward still your only male heir, you have Parliament pass a final act of succession that, while confirming Edward's primary place, remarkably restores both of your daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, to the line of succession after their brother. The court heralds, you imagine, must have been in a constant state of bewildered agitation, requiring newly drafted charts and large, easy-to-read prompt cards just to remember at any given state banquet who was currently to be addressed as Her Highness the Princess, who was merely the Lady Mary, who was the present Queen, and who was the formerly Queen, but now the King's beloved and valued sister. Getting a royal title wrong in your presence could be a seriously awkward, if not downright career-ending, social blunder. You spend considerable time and intellectual energy personally drafting and redrafting your last will and testament. It is a document of immense complexity, designed to lay out the precise order of succession and to establish a regency council that will govern the kingdom during your son Edward's minority. You attempt, through the dense legalistic language of this document, to control the future of your kingdom, even from beyond the grave, to foresee every possible contingency, to prevent every potential dispute. This is not the work of a passionate lover or a dashing warrior. It is the meticulous, anxious, and deeply boring work of a lawyer and an administrator, obsessed with legacy, stability, and control. You imagine your royal lawyers had a pre-printed parchment template for these acts of succession, with just a few convenient blank spaces left to fill in for name of new queen and current legal status of previous royal children. It certainly would have saved a great deal of time and quill sharpening. Tudor constitutional historians continue to debate the long-term significance of your various, often conflicting, acts of succession and your meticulously crafted will. They question whether these instruments represented a tyrannical imposition of the monarch's personal and often erratic desires upon the fundamental laws of the kingdom, or if they constituted a revolutionary, if self-serving, use of parliamentary statute to define, control, and ultimately legitimize the royal succession in a new and unprecedented way. All this frantic legal activity, this constant rewriting of the nation's future on parchment, reveals your single, deepest, and most abiding fear, the specter of a disputed succession and a return to the bloody, chaotic anarchy of the Wars of the Roses. That conflict had torn England apart for decades, and its memory is still raw. You, as a Tudor, are determined that it will not happen again. And so you toil over your documents, your decrees, your wills and testaments, trying to bind the uncertain, unpredictable future with the legalistic chains of parliamentary statutes and meticulously crafted, carefully sealed royal pronouncements. Your succession, on paper at least, finally seems settled. A neat, logical line of heirs, designed to prevent the chaos you so profoundly fear. But while your formidable mind remains intensely occupied with these grand dynastic plans and complex legal fortifications for the future, your own body, the very vessel of your magnificent royal authority, is beginning to mount its own slow, inexorable, and deeply personal rebellion. Its increasing frailties and persistent, painful ailments introducing a new and unwelcome set of challenges to your carefully structured daily royal routine. And so you toil over your documents, your decrees, your meticulous wills and testaments, attempting to command the uncertain future, to bind destiny itself with the heavy legalistic chains of parliamentary statutes and precisely worded royal proclamations. Your succession, on paper at least, finally seems settled, a neat, logical, if somewhat convoluted, line of heirs designed to prevent the bloody chaos you so profoundly fear. It is a monumental achievement of legal and political maneuvering, born from decades of anxiety and strife. But while your formidable mind remains intensely occupied with these grand dynastic plans and complex legal fortifications for the future of your kingdom, your own body, the very vessel of your magnificent royal authority, the body that was once the envy of princes and the pride of your nation, is beginning to mount its own slow, inexorable, and deeply personal rebellion. Its increasing frailties and persistent, painful ailments are now introducing a new and unwelcome set of challenges to your carefully structured and increasingly circumscribed daily royal routine. The contrast with your younger self is stark and must be for you a source of constant, grating frustration. Gone is the Golden Prince, the handsome, athletic champion of the jousting lists, the tireless rider who could spend 10 hours in the saddle during a hunt and still dance half the night away at court. In his place now stands, or more often sits, an aging, increasingly corpulent, and often pain-ridden monarch. Your world, once defined by vigorous action and boundless energy, is now steadily, irrevocably shrinking. The primary source of your daily misery is the persistent, suppurating ulcer on your leg. This foul, weeping wound, believed by many to be a lingering consequence of that serious jousting accident you suffered back in 1536, has become your constant, unwelcome companion. It throbs with a dull, insistent pain that can, at times, flare into an agonizing torment. It makes walking difficult, standing for long periods a trial, and riding a horse a near impossibility. Each day, a significant portion of your routine is now dedicated to the tedious and often painful process of having this wound cleaned and dressed by your royal physicians and surgeons. It is a humbling, undignified business for a king. The ulcer also emits a foul odor, a scent of decay, that even the fragrant herbs strewn on the floor and the scented pomanders carried by your nervous courtiers cannot entirely disguise. This physical decline forces a profound adaptation of your royal routine. The energetic pastimes that once defined you are now mostly beyond your reach. You can no longer thunder down the tilt yard, your lance shattering against an opponent's shield. The hunt, if you participate at all, is a much tamer affair. You might be transported to a prearranged standing, a small purpose-built tower or platform in the forest, from which you can shoot at game driven towards you by beaters. It is a pale shadow of the exhilarating chase of your youth. Your world becomes increasingly confined to the indoors, to the council chamber, your private apartments, your chapel. You spend more and more time simply sitting, a great, powerful intellect trapped inside a painful, unreliable, and increasingly immobile body. The daily grind of meetings and paperwork, once a tedious but manageable part of your life, now becomes almost all-consuming, with little prospect of physical release to break its monotony. Your daily agenda, once filled with exciting appointments for jousting practice and a vigorous day's stag hunting, is now more likely to feature such thrilling and deeply unkingly entries as endure the lancing and rebandaging of the royal leg, receive a lengthy and entirely unhelpful lecture on the imbalance of the royal humors from the chief physician, and attempt to find a comfortable position in a heavily cushioned chair for 3 consecutive hours. The glamour of your earlier reign, it must be said, has faded rather considerably. This constant pain and frustrating lack of mobility inevitably take their toll on your famously formidable temperament. Your courtiers learn to tread carefully around you, their every action dictated by the perceived state of your health and mood on any given day. Your well-known impatience can now flare, with little warning, into terrifying fits of royal rage. You become more suspicious, more prone to brooding, your sharp mind still very much active, but now often clouded by physical suffering. You can imagine the official court risk assessment for approaching the king with a difficult petition now includes a vital, if unspoken, preliminary section on current estimated royal leg pain level. A low pain day might earn the petitioner a land grant and a gracious royal smile. A high pain day might earn them a torrent of kingly abuse and possibly a one-way trip to the Tower of London to contemplate their poor timing. It was always important your courtiers would have learned to check the royal forecast. Your highly learned royal physicians do what they can, of course, but their methods, by the standards of a later age, are primitive and largely ineffective. They approach your ailments with the medical theories of their time, based on the ancient concept of the 4 bodily humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Your illnesses are seen as an imbalance of these humors, and their treatments are designed to correct it. They apply all manner of salves and herbal poultices to your ulcerated leg, some soothing, some probably just irritating. They might resort to bleeding you, a common practice for a host of ailments, or prescribe various unpleasant purges and emetics to cleanse your system. Your daily routine now often includes these long, tedious, undignified, and largely useless sessions with your anxious medical team. Medical historians and biographers continue to speculate on the precise nature of all of your ailments in these later years, and how your undeniable chronic pain and declining physical health may have directly influenced your political decisions, your relationships, and your increasingly tyrannical personality. They debate whether your famous later life paranoia and cruelty were simply a product of your agonizing physical suffering, or if they were perhaps a natural, if unfortunate, development of an autocratic and ego-driven character that was now freed from the moderating influences of youthful energy and physical well-being. As your mobility decreases further, your royal engineers and craftsmen devise new and ingenious, if somewhat cumbersome, contraptions to move your now considerable person around the vast royal palaces you so painstakingly built. So you might be carried from your private chambers to the council room, or through the gardens, in a magnificent, heavily upholstered, and very wide chair borne on the shoulders of 6 or 8 strong yeomen of the royal guard. It is a slow, swaying, and perhaps slightly undignified human-powered royal limousine, a procession that serves as a constant public reminder of both your supreme status and your growing physical dependency. Progress from one room to another becomes quite literally a very, very slow process indeed. It is a strange and frustrating existence for a man who was once the very embodiment of Renaissance vitality. This is a monarch who had dazzled Europe with his athletic prowess, his intellectual vigor, and his boundless energy, now facing the deeply humbling universal realities of chronic illness, persistent pain, and the slow, inevitable decay of the human body. He still possesses the same sharp mind, the same formidable will, the same absolute authority as king. But that authority is now housed in a body that often feels more like a prison than a palace. And so, the daily agenda of you, the aging King of England, becomes increasingly, almost entirely, defined by these profound physical limitations and the relentless, wearying management of constant, nagging pain. Your world, once as wide as your ambitions, shrinks from the open, sunlit hunting fields and the glorious tournament grounds of your youth to the close, often stuffy, and increasingly claustrophobic confines of your royal chambers. And as you feel your own formidable physical strength inexorably wane, day by weary day, the future of your kingdom, the future of the entire Tudor project, now embodied in the frail, precious form of your young son, and only legitimate male heir, Prince Edward, becomes an even more urgent, more pressing, and truly all-consuming royal obsession. And so, the daily agenda of you, the aging King of England, becomes increasingly, almost entirely, defined by your profound physical limitations and the relentless, wearying management of constant, nagging pain. Your world, once as wide and boundless as your youthful ambitions, has now shrunk from the sunlit, open hunting fields and the glorious, splintering tournament grounds of your prime to the close, often stuffy and increasingly claustrophobic confines of your royal chambers. The great lion of a king is becoming a caged lion, still powerful, still dangerous, but unable to roam as he once did. And as you feel your own formidable physical strength inexorably wane, day by weary day, the future of your kingdom, the future of the entire Tudor project, now embodied in the frail, precious, and still very young form of your son, and only legitimate male heir, Prince Edward, becomes an even more urgent, more pressing, and truly all-consuming royal obsession. Your every waking thought, it seems, is now dedicated to securing your son's inheritance and ensuring a smooth, stable transition of power upon your death. Prince Edward is the glittering jewel of your kingdom, the long-awaited fulfillment of your decades-long, often ruthless dynastic quest. His upbringing is managed with an almost suffocating degree of care. He is largely kept in a protected, almost isolated environment, shielded as much as possible from the ever-present threat of disease and infection that so often claimed the lives of children, royal or otherwise, in your era. He is provided with the finest humanist and Protestant tutors, his rigorous education designed to mold him into the ideal image of a learned, pious, and wise future king. You take immense pride in his intelligence and his progress, but this pride is tinged with a deep, gnawing anxiety for his safety and for the security of his future throne. To protect this future, you turn once more to the tools you have come to rely on throughout your reign: the law, the power of Parliament, and the meticulous, almost obsessive drafting of legal documents. Your primary focus in your final years becomes the perfecting of your last will and testament. This is no simple document. It is a monumental work of statecraft, a legal fortress designed to control the fate of your kingdom even from beyond the grave. Imagine yourself in your great chamber, propped up with pillows, your ailing leg resting on a stool, dictating for long, weary hours to your secretaries. You review draft after painstaking draft. You debate every clause. You consider every possible contingency, every potential loophole that a future rival might seek to exploit. The scratch of quills on parchment is the dominant sound of your final years, The key provisions of this meticulously crafted will are designed to prevent the very chaos you so fear. First and foremost, it confirms the line of succession as laid out in your final act of succession. Your son Edward is your undisputed heir. After him, should he die without children of his own, the crown is to pass to your elder daughter Mary and her heirs. And after Mary, should she too fail to produce an heir, it is to pass to your younger daughter Elizabeth and her heirs. This arrangement putting your two daughters, both of whom had at different times been declared illegitimate by previous acts of Parliament, back into the line of succession is a remarkable, pragmatic, and for its time, highly unusual solution to your lack of multiple male heirs. Perhaps even more significant is the detailed provision you make for your son's minority. You know that Edward will still be just a boy when you die, and the kingdom will need to be governed by a regent, wary of entrusting absolute power to a single ambitious nobleman who might seek to dominate your son or usurp power for himself. You devise a novel solution. You do not name a single Lord Protector. Instead, your will establishes a regency council of 16 executors, a collective of carefully chosen nobles and officials from different factions who are to govern the kingdom jointly until Edward comes of age at 18. It is a deliberate attempt to create a balance of power, to ensure no one man can become too powerful. You spend long hours considering the precise makeup of this council, balancing the reformist faction, led by men like Edward Seymour, Earl of Hertford, and your son's uncle, against the more conservative faction, hoping that their competing interests will prevent any one group from gaining total control. You imagine your royal lawyers and secretaries must have lived in a state of constant low-grade terror during this period. Wait, did His Majesty say the Earl of Hertford is to have 3 votes on Tuesdays, or was it the Bishop of Winchester? Let's just write this down very, very carefully and hope we don't end up being the first test case for the will's treason clauses. Historians who analyze your final will and testament vigorously debate your true intentions for this innovative Regency Council. Was your creation of a large, balanced, and potentially unwieldy council a masterful and shrewd attempt to ensure political stability and prevent any single faction from dominating your young son? Or was it perhaps a recipe for inevitable infighting, political paralysis, and factional gridlock, that you were simply too ill, too weary, or perhaps too indecisive in your final months to resolve into a more straightforward arrangement? Even in these final pain-filled years, you remain ruthless in eliminating any perceived threats to your son's future reign. In the last few months of your life, you turn against the powerful Howard family, the Duke of Norfolk, and his poet son, the Earl of Surrey. You see their high noble blood, their Catholic leanings, and their perceived ambition as a potential danger to the security of your Protestant heir and his Regency Council. This final, grim act of political pruning is in your mind one last, necessary piece of housekeeping to secure your legacy. As your own physical strength continues to fail, even the act of signing the endless mountain of state documents becomes too much for you. A dry stamp, a clever embossed replica of your magnificent royal signature, is created by your officials. This stamp can be impressed onto a document, leaving a faint indentation of your signature. Your formal legal assent is then given by designated clerks who carefully apply ink to this embossed impression. Even your own royal sign manual, the most potent symbol of your personal authority, becomes a mediated bureaucratic process, a poignant testament to the fact that the great impersonal machinery of government must continue to grind on even when the monarch himself is fading away. This is the ultimate high-stakes estate planning. You are not just deciding who gets the antique silverware and your second-best bed. You are meticulously dictating the future governance of a nation, defining the religious faith of millions, and desperately trying to preemptively manage a hostile corporate takeover that will not even happen until after you are gone. Your court, in these final years, becomes a place of hushed anticipation and intense, behind-the-scenes maneuvering. The great nobles and counselors, while still outwardly deferential to you, their ailing but still formidable king, are already looking to the future. Factions are solidifying. Alliances are being quietly forged, all in preparation for the power vacuum that will inevitably follow your death. You are still the great aging sun around which all these ambitious planets revolve, but they are already cannily calculating their future orbits for the day when that sun is finally extinguished. The first draft of your will probably just said something simple like Edward gets everything. Mary and Elizabeth, please try not to break it. Council, do your absolute best not to start a civil war on your first day in charge. Thank you. Your advisors, no doubt, tactfully suggested that a few more detailed and legally binding clauses might be advisable. And so, the great legal fortress of your will is finally built. Its intricate clauses like ramparts, its carefully worded codicils like watchtowers, all meticulously designed and constructed to protect your precious son and the future of your Tudor line. You have, you believe, done all that a mortal king can possibly do to command the future, to impose order on the chaos that you so deeply fear will follow your passing. Now, as the shadows lengthen inexorably on your own long, dramatic, and tumultuous reign, and you feel that final, undeniable weariness settling deep into your very bones, your thoughts, in your last quiet, reflective moments, must inevitably turn from the future you have so painstakingly planned to the past you have so powerfully, and often so ruthlessly, forged, and to the vast, complex, and often deeply contradictory legacy you will inevitably leave behind for your kingdom to inherit. And so, the great legal fortress of your will is finally, painstakingly built. Its intricate clauses are like fortified ramparts, its carefully worded codicils like high watchtowers, all meticulously designed and constructed to protect your precious son, Prince Edward, and to secure the future of your great Tudor line from the chaos you so profoundly fear. You have, you believe, done all that a mortal king can possibly do to command the future, to impose your royal will upon the unwritten pages of history to come. Now, as the shadows lengthen inexorably on your own long, dramatic, and tumultuous reign, and you feel that final, undeniable weariness settling deep into your very bones, your thoughts, in your last quiet, reflective moments, must inevitably turn from the future you have so painstakingly planned to the past you have so powerfully, and often so ruthlessly, forged, and to the vast, complex, and often deeply contradictory legacy you will inevitably leave behind for your kingdom to inherit. In the cold, dark, early hours of a January morning in the year 1547, at your palace of Whitehall, your long reign finally comes to its quiet, sputtering end. You, Henry VIII, King of England, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith and supreme head on earth of the Church of England, draw your last, labored breath. The great, roaring lion of a king is finally silenced. For a few hours, the news is kept a closely guarded secret among your most senior counselors, allowing them to secure their positions and prepare for the transition of power. Then, the official announcement is made. The 9-year-old Prince Edward is proclaimed King Edward VI, and the Regency Council, that complex committee you so carefully designed in your will, takes the reins of government. The Tudor dynasty, for now, holds. But what is the inheritance you leave behind? It is a legacy so vast, so multifaceted, and so deeply contradictory that historians will debate its true nature for all the centuries to come. To some, you will be remembered as a great king, the very embodiment of national sovereignty, the father of the Royal Navy, who strengthened England's defenses and laid the foundations for its future maritime power. They will see you as a true Renaissance prince, a patron of the arts, a man of learning and charisma who broke the shackles of foreign papal authority and forged a new independent English identity. To many others, however, you will forever be the monstrous caricature of legend, the bloated, cruel, and capricious tyrant who callously executed his wives, his ministers, and his subjects on a whim, the man who for his own selfish dynastic and personal desires destroyed the ancient monastic traditions of his kingdom, vandalized centuries of religious art and architecture, and plunged his nation into a religious turmoil that would last for generations. You are both the larger-than-life figure of magnificence and power, and the deeply flawed, often ruthless, man whose personal anxieties and desires changed the course of a nation's history. Your most significant and undeniable legacy is, of course, the English Reformation, your break with Rome, initiated not from a desire for Protestant theology, but from the pragmatic need for an annulment. Nevertheless, set in motion a religious revolution whose consequences you could not have fully foreseen. It was a monumental administrative and legal upheaval, fundamentally altering the relationship between church and state in England forever. You also, in your relentless use of Parliament to enact your will, particularly in religious matters, fundamentally changed the nature of English governance, greatly enhancing the power and legislative authority of that institution in a way that would have profound implications for the future development of English constitutional law. You also leave behind a more tangible legacy. Your magnificent palaces, like Hampton Court and St. James's, still stand as testaments to your grand vision and your passion for architecture. Your investments in shipbuilding and naval administration, creating a permanent standing Royal Navy, were a hugely significant, if perhaps less glamorous, achievement that would pay dividends for England for centuries to come. The administrative reforms you oversaw, such as the creation of new specialized departments of state like the Court of Augmentations, marked a crucial step away from a more medieval style of personal household government towards a more bureaucratic, recognizably modern state apparatus. Perhaps your most enduring, if least glamorous, legacy of all is the sheer, astonishing mountain of paperwork you and your highly efficient ministers generated. Thousands upon thousands of meticulously kept letters, detailed decrees, dense account books, and formal legal statutes survive to this day in national archives, a testament to a monarch, for all his famous passions and terrible rages, also presided over an increasingly organized, document-obsessed, and administratively complex government. It is a historian's dream, and perhaps an insomniac's perfect cure. Yet, there were also the unintended consequences, the future you could not control, despite all your careful planning. The very religious turmoil you unleashed by breaking with Rome would not be easily contained, and it would lead to decades of persecution and bitter conflict under the reigns of your own children, the staunchly Protestant Edward, the fiercely Catholic Mary, and finally, the pragmatically Protestant Elizabeth. Your meticulously crafted will, that legal fortress designed to ensure a stable succession, was almost immediately challenged and effectively circumvented by your own Regency Council, as the ambitious Edward Seymour swiftly had himself made Lord Protector, upsetting the careful balance of power you had envisioned. Even the great King Henry VIII, it turned out, could not entirely command the future from beyond the grave. Historians today continue to assess the true nature of the Henrician Reformation, vigorously debating whether your motivations were indeed primarily personal and dynastic, with theology being merely a convenient tool to achieve your ends, or if, over time, you developed a genuine, coherent, if undoubtedly self-serving theological vision for a new, independent English church, free from the dictates of Rome. It's a peculiar form of historical immortality you have achieved, isn't it? From a feared, revered, and complex living monarch, you have become, in the popular imagination, a simplified, almost cartoonish figure, a larger-than-life character, defined by your 6 wives, your immense appetite, and your terrible temper. The real man, the scholar, the musician, the tireless administrator, is often lost beneath the weight of his own dramatic legend. And so, the long, tumultuous, and profoundly consequential reign of King Henry VIII, a reign of great sound and of great fury, of magnificent construction and of brutal destruction, of deep piety and of radical religious change, of profound personal anxiety and of absolute, unwavering royal will, finally draws to its quiet, historical close in a silent chamber at Whitehall Palace. The echoes of his boisterous laughter, his terrifying shouts of rage, his solemn pronouncements from the throne, and the soft notes of his own compositions played on a solitary lute late at night, all now begin to fade, to soften, to recede into the deep, enveloping silence of the centuries. The great palaces he built still stand, some in magnificent splendor, some as romantic weathered ruins, but they are now just empty, silent stages, their grand Tudor dramas long since played out, their once teeming corridors now walked only by tourists and by ghosts. Let go now of the immense, crushing weight of the golden crown, the constant, gnawing burden of securing the succession, the endless, wearying anxieties of the powerful, aging king. His story, a vast and deeply complex tapestry woven from threads of power and faith, of love and loss, of human frailty and indomitable will, is now finally complete. Allow the memory of this tumultuous, larger-than-life figure to soften, to dissolve, to dissipate into the gentle, approaching quiet of your own well-deserved and entirely peaceful rest. There are no more decrees to be signed tonight, no more tedious council meetings to endure, no more uncertain futures to anxiously plan for. There is only the peaceful stillness of this present moment, the simple comfort of your bed, the gentle, easy, and natural rhythm of your own breathing. Let the dust of 16th century England, with all its glories and its sorrows, finally settle and allow your mind to become wonderfully clear, beautifully calm, and entirely ready for deep, restorative sleep. The great king is at rest, and so can you be. Sleep now, sleep deeply, sweet dreams,